Yes, 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 it's showtime, folks. GI Joburg episode 290. Where are the O-rings, Hasbro? My name is Steve. I'm joined by my usual crew, Paul, Deadly Pencils. Hello, Paul.
How's it, bud?
He's
Hello, everybody.
and Rob.
Hey, back on the airwaves.
Always with a little bit of a performance. I love it. I love it. Boys, hello. Paul, Rob, how are we on this fine, fine Sunday evening South African time and Monday morning, Australia time?
Sunday.
Well, Rob, I nominate Rob to go first.
Oh,
Whoa.
okay.
Stephen, do
Yeah.
you second that?
I do second that motion. Rob,
Oh
how
my
are you?
goodness. I guess I'm going to go first. I'm doing quite well. I finally had my first weekend off an entire weekend off in over a month this weekend.
Oh,
And I
good.
had tons of sleeping. I actually started watching The Mentalist. I've always wanted to watch it properly. It's a really fun show.
Rob's
It's
a
very decent
housewife.
overall.
I'm
So,
curious, Rob. You're a Trekkie more so than I am. Did you ever
yeah.
get into Picard season 3, or any Picard for that matter?
So I watched some of season one. I kind of jumped off at a certain point before they started torturing characters and ripping their eyes out. I watched the
Jeez.
first episode of season 2 and the last episode of season 2, so I missed out all the rubbish in between. But having said all of this, yes, I have watched most of season 3. I still need to finish it, and it's actually really good.
I haven't watched
It
season 3 yet.
is. It's actually it's fan service, I think, done right, and it kind of
It's an absolute
feels
fan wank. I kind of
right.
miss my Star Trek hand job week to week. Honestly, giving me exactly what I need. You know.
It's absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed every episode I've watched. I've seen clips from later on in the season, so I know what like crazy shit is coming my way.
Hmm.
So I'm very excited to keep going and finish it. It's wild that you have to, as I've said to some people who've been like, "Oh, should I watch Picard?" I'm like, yeah, you can just skip the first 2 seasons. Like, you don't have to watch any of it because it has no bearing upon the third season in any way whatsoever, except one plot point that kind of happens near the end of season 1. But other than that, you can kind of pick it up as you go along if there's anything else. It's really good. It's absolutely fantastic.
Feels
man.
very deliberate that they've insulated this season from the rest. It's a course correction and proof to the adage that you can indeed polish a turd.
Well, guys, I felt like generally in Picard there were things to enjoy, and I enjoyed the series. I certainly, and I think I kind of got it got me at the right time because the other series, Discovery was on, and Discovery was, yeah, it's Discovery, and it was just Picard was just a much better flavor of Star Trek for me versus Discovery. So I was still getting a Star Trek fix. I'm sure if I look back at it, if I rewatch it now, maybe more objectively, I've probably find a lot more things that bug me about it. But honestly, good old Patrick Stewart on screen is always cool for me. That guy's great, and even if the stories are written bad or whatever, I love his character and I like him. So that's just what put me through those episodes, and I still
Well,
haven't watched the third season
I'm
because
glad you were able to get through them. I
yeah.
wasn't. But season 3 definitely is a complete and different beast from the first 2 seasons, and
And
I
I'm dying to
welcome
watch it. And apparently,
it.
Strange New Worlds is pretty cool as well. Is it Strange New Worlds or is it Brave New Worlds? Strange New Worlds.
Strange.
Strange. Apparently, that's a lot of fun as well. So,
I have one overarching critique for, I suppose, modern Star Trek in general, but Star Trek Picard season 3 is not exempt from this. Who thought it was a great idea to introduce like swear words into the Star Trek universe? I know
I don't know.
from a writing point of view, it maybe makes the characters more relatable in their minds, because yeah, these guys, they grunt and they swear and they cuss just like us. But Star Trek never really did say F-bombs and shits and damn it. Like, they somehow steered clear of that language. And now that it's in Star Trek, every time they do, like, drop an expletive, I'm like, that's not very Star Trekky. It snaps me out of it every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
same.
I imagine it's like walking into your parents, having sex. It's that kind of feeling.
Wow.
Yeah, it
I
doesn't
have
belong.
this. I had this friend in school. His name's Daniel. A very, very nice guy, but he's but very nice guy, and he's from a family of missionaries, and they used to live in a campus, like a sort of a missionary campus there in Muldersdrift, and everybody that lived there was American, and his parents never swore, and they just nobody there ever swore. So of course, you got me, and I swear like all the time. And the one time I heard Daniel say shit, I heard him say, I just about fell over, and it's like it's a really weird thing, and so that's how it feels like for me with Star Trek. Every time I go, oh yeah, that's like Daniel swearing. It's just not right, because the whole thing
Yeah,
with Star Trek,
it's
right, is that
jarring.
And we're
we as a
not prudes.
species
Like we're not sensitive to swear words.
swearing.
I know we swear all the time. It's just it doesn't feel right for
We're
the
pirates.
show.
Yeah.
It's weird. It is so weird to hear like Jean-Luc Picard say "fuck." It's so weird.
But
anyways, guys, if we haven't lost
Anyway.
everyone with Star Trek talk by now, the title of this episode reads "Where are the O-rings, Hasbro?" And I have ambushed both of my co-hosts on this topic because
believe
yes, he has.
I did not want to premeditate your responses. In terms of a timeline, the triumphant return of O-rings was announced along with the Haslab Sky Striker at the end of 2021. This was October, I believe, during the Hasbro Pulse Palaver. PulseCon is what they called it. They just lined up all their brands, and each team did announcements and unveils of new product. And so the Hasbro team actually did a very good job, kind of showed up the competition. They announced the return of O-rings. They announced new classified reveals. And then the pièce de résistance was the Haslab Sky Striker, the first GI Joe Haslab project ever produced, ever announced. And we all know it was a success in the end. It did cross the finish line and crossed it,
It was a
well
success.
enough to have 2 unlocks. Certainly
Mm.
beat out the Rancor, which expired the day before without reaching its funding goal. I mean, that was an exhilarating little passage of history. Like a major brand like Star Wars couldn't cross the finish line, but GI Joe managed to beat that hump, and the Sky Striker went into production. Flash forward to June of 2022. The retro O-Ring collection is steaming along with a few releases. It's Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. It's Duke and Cobra Commander. It's the Cobra Officer and Trooper. And then the final announcement in that particular Yojo June was the Stinger with Driver, O-Ring Driver. That is June of 2022. We're almost coming up on 12 months now with no new announcements. It feels like if this was an initiative, surely it had more momentum planned than what we're seeing on the ground. I want to get some honest responses from you guys. Why do you suppose that is? And what is your projection for the future of O-rings produced by Hasbro?
Well, the Duke Cobra Commander set is on BBTS, and it was on special the other day.
Oh, how much was it?
Oh God, I think it was like $40 or $56. I can't remember. I was looking at a lot of toys. I just remember some of the McFarlane stuff being $10 and being
We do have some insider info. Ryan Sweeney's in the chats. Hello, Ryan. And hello, Zantara. Welcome, guys. Ryan says, I did get to ask Lenny and Tony about O-rings, and it sounds like the figures did not sell well enough to keep investing in more tooling. However, we will see more Transformer Joe crossovers. Well, that's the cheat sheet right there. That kind of takes the wind out of the sails of that second question. And the first. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Close the book on this topic. There will be no more O-ring GI Joes, and the reason is it didn't sell well.
They
I've
didn't
got
sell
such
well.
a cheeky answer to this, actually.
Okay.
And it's so cool that you actually brought this up, because I had the privilege not too long ago of checking out a Joy Toy figure.
Mhm.
Okay. And if, for those listeners who don't know, Joy Toy make 1:18 scale, sort of futuristic military figures, very much in the vein of the modern era GI Joe stuff, which also have mechs and vehicles that accompany them at 1:18 and 1:24 scale. The 1:18 are actually vehicles, and they're mechs, and they're amazing, and there's some bikes and all kinds of cool stuff. They are pricey though, right? To be fair, but anyway. They have a line of Warhammer figures, which is that very popular tabletop game, and I got to see those Warhammer figures in hand, and I know what the recommended retail price is here in South Africa, which is under 1,000 rand. Okay, that's comparable to what you pay for a Marvel Legends in South Africa now. In fact, I think Marvel Legends are actually 1,100 rand in some places, which is disgusting. And you look at the quality of these figures and you're like, oh my God, they're amazing. The paint quality is great. The articulation is good. The finish on the toys is good. You can see that they come pressed out of a factory and are heavily quality checked and all that stuff. And it gets you wondering, like, what the hell is Hasbro actually doing? Like, what part of this business do they actually care about? Do they care about making cool stuff? Do they care about the fans? Do they care about a quick buck? It's a rhetorical question. Of course, we know they care about a quick buck. And the thing is, it's just sad to see like another company like Joy Toy like seriously kicking like Hasbro's ass when Hasbro are meant to be giants. And also, to answer the O-ring questions, well, we got all these other industrious businesses that are coming up with their own series of O-ring figures. We got the Legend of the Hidden Force guys. We've got the Eagle Force stuff coming. Oh, fill me in here. And of course,
Is
the
Eagle
Red
Force O-ring?
There
I think
is
that's
that.
modern
Yeah,
construction.
what's that? But yeah, there is that line
Oh,
that's got like the Russian guy and whatever's
call
in
sign
there.
Longbow,
Call sign Longbow. Thank you. Sorry,
Operation
but
Recall, Legends of the Hidden Force. There are a few that I'm blanking on. Some that are not even crowdfunded that seem kind of to just appear from
yeah,
time
and
to
then of
time.
course we've got Skeletron, who's doing their stuff as well, and they've got O-ring and sort of modern sculpt offerings as well as 6-inch stuff coming. And it's just like Hasbro, like I don't know,
Well,
Hasbro doesn't know
that
what they're
just tells
doing.
me there's all this stuff. Look, I guess those are still relatively minuscule numbers in terms of actual O-ring figure demand.
Mm.
But I'm just wondering if there would be any difference made if Hasbro forged ahead and weren't doing the main character hump, as it's been called. What I mean by that is they're producing figures that if you do have an existing O-ring collection, they become kind of easy to pass up on. I'm not about to replace my original Baroness with the Baroness that came with Megatron, the Mega Hiss. I'm not
Mm.
about to chuck out my original Ace for the Ace that came in the Haslab Sky Striker.
Oh,
I'm not about
totally.
to get the Cobra Trooper and Officer 2-pack and add them to my regular blue shirts because I know those figures have issues, or at least the Officer does. So, like, there are detractors from getting me, the core audience for these figures, from buying them. To buy them? I don't know. I basically have reasons to give them a skip. I'm like, yeah, it's nice, but I've already got Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. So
Yeah,
what put my nose out of joint?
listen. I
So
mean,
they're
guys,
wondering why the
Mm.
sales were so low. I mean, Steven's getting a very good reason why is because
they're poorly
we
made,
already own
poorly
these figures.
constructed. Yeah, but
Most
they're
of the people
also
own
poorly
them already.
conceived as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, so you're not coming up with anything new. I think why they didn't do well is because the people that would have bought them already own them.
They're
So
not
that's why they
must-have
they
figures. They're not
didn't
Pythona
do
and
badly
Dr.
because people
Venom.
don't want O-ring figures. It's that they chose the wrong figures to make.
That- Yeah, that's a good point, Rob. And Steve also brings up a really good point to go with that is, yeah, you're right. There is no Pythona. Or
An
Dr. Venom.
O-ring,
Like we
an
would snatch those up.
an official Hasbro O-ring Pythona and Dr. Venom would be must-have figures for me.
Yeah.
And
They
I
fill
think
in the gaps.
I speak for most O-ring collectors in that regard. Like we've got so much of the classics, the kind of the easy sells. The smart move would be to create one of a kind new figures, and then you could kind of dangle Ramp Rat in my nose. But he was a Franken Joe, and I have no problem using a blue shirt, waving Cobra Rattlers into the hangar bay. I don't need a specific new Viper, but I mean, I suppose it's nice. I know Gary V likes his Ramp Rats. He's recently got a second one. Well, why the hell not? If they're flooding the market currently, everyone's trying to shell off their Haslab figures or the jet or both.
I
Because
just think
everyone
it's
bought
bad.
5.
I just think it's weird. Like it's sad that for me personally, and maybe this is more of a subjective thing, but I don't feel any FOMO regarding the Sky Striker whatsoever, or any of the characters that came with it. I know that I'd like, when you've like said, "Oh, I need to dump these figures off on somebody," and then I joke and I go, "Oh, you can always dump them off with me." But at the end of the day, really, like I'm so neither here nor there about anything that came with that Sky Striker. Like, and I think that's kind of what Rob was talking about as well. There's a general apathy to these guys because there isn't anything new. There isn't anything really new, and we're also not getting a better version of what we already have from Hasbro of these same characters. So it's like it's weird. It's like the bad version of the Motu Origins releases. The Motu Origins, they are improvements of the originals in my opinion, and they're exciting and they definitely fill gaps in guys' collections. Whereas the GI Joe O-ring stuff doesn't seem to do that, and Hasbro can't admit that to themselves and course correct. At least that's what I feel. I
There is
also
no
like,
course correction because there is no course. We now have almost definitive proof that the O-ring initiative is DOA, not DOA.
Yeah.
DO, it's dead on its current
Dead
trajectory.
now.
MIA. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
missing in
mate,
action.
missing in action.
I'm gonna highlight Ryan's comments again because I mean, real talk. He's dropping absolute reasons, hard financial reasonings. That the real issue is Mattel and Hasbro are too big. They bought up all the competition and so need to sell so many toys for them to make money off them. There are massive overheads to a
Of course.
listed company like Hasbro and Mattel. They do have to answer to their shareholders and also
Yeah, sure.
pay the salaries of every single person who has a hand in production of these figures. So if the units aren't selling to the magnitude that they need, well, it's purely a business decision. There's no heart or soul in it. It's just about the numbers. Whereas fan projects certainly have to sell very much smaller, limited quantities in order to kind of balance the books. And also they're being driven by people who kind of
Passionate.
are like us. They've done the homework
Mm.
for months, if not years in advance. They are anxious. They are dying to see their figures make production. So they will massage the numbers. The perfect example is Hidden Force. They weren't confident in the Kickstarter reaching its funding goal, so they pulled the plug early and decided to rejig things and are now coming back strong. There is still funding period on that, so if you haven't checked out Legends of the Hidden Force, I urge you to do
Please do.
so. You can get some sweet ninja figures, and their O-rings, and they have all the new mod cons, but they still will pass the squint test of fitting in with all your Ninja Force. Oh yeah, so yeah,
Okay.
they're
But so these small guys can do this. They can be
Mm-hmm.
creative while holding other jobs and doing other things. Nothing is preventing a gigantic corporation like Hasbro actually investing in
Thank
market
you.
research. What did
Yep.
they do back in the 80s? What did they do back in
Yep.
the 90s? They did
Oh,
research.
Rob,
They had departments
I'm
that figured the shit
so
out.
glad you
They
said
had
this.
creative departments. They have art departments that can actually come up with new figures and new ideas. So much more than these small guys can, who are showing up Hasbro. You know?
Dude, I'm so happy you said this because this is exactly my thinking. It's like, yes, everything that you guys just that Ryan mentioned, I fully agree with, because that is definitely like the challenges that come with these big companies. But then at the same time, the reality of it is that these big companies actually do waste a lot of money on stuff, and anybody who works for them knows this. B, and I mean that is pretty much fact. I mean, I see it all the time. I can't believe the amount of money some of these businesses waste on things like expos and stuff. But anyway, because they get it as a write-off. And B, they did the Haslab. Essentially, they did a Kickstarter. So, like, the irony of the whole thing is that these small businesses, like like Legends of the Hidden Force, they're doing a Kickstarter because they're a small business. They're trying to get seed funding for this thing. So they can pull it off, but Hasbro can't pull it off because they have this big 80s corporate mentality still. They haven't evolved. They haven't like tried to evolve their strategy. And I'm saying Hasbro, but a lot of companies, it's not just Hasbro that have done this. A lot of businesses are still trying to do business today the same way they did in the 80s and early 90s. They haven't tried to actually evolve. They've just tried to change their optics, the way that they are perceived. That's it. They still run their businesses. They still think their old way. They still get rid of people. Like, I mean, recently Hasbro did a whole bunch of firings and stuff like that. They're not thinking, like they're not being smart about this. They're not going, oh yeah, like Rob said now. Oh, okay, cool. Well, why don't we like put a bit of seed funding towards an R&D team? Maybe we open a small subdivision of Hasbro, get a small dedicated team of people to try and run it and try to kickstart a product, and then get it up and running and let them do it by themselves. I hate to say this, and I hate to give this guy credit at the moment, but back in the day, Matty Collector, that's what they did, and it was pretty successful for them. So, like, Hasbro is not learning these lessons. They're not learning from this
shade at Mr. Mattel.
No, not Mr. Mattel. I'm throwing shade at Mr. Spectre Creative, because fortunately
he name dropped him. I was calling him Mr. Mattel or Captain Mattel or what do you want to be?
No, he's like, I think the man's got some very good insights, but I also think he's played out a little bit now anyway, so it doesn't matter. Who cares? That's my opinion, not the opinion of GI Joburg. Then also just one thing to like also add to that whole mix of things is that we live in a time now where small businesses can do cool things. So why doesn't Hasbro then, instead of holding on to the brand and being gatekeepers of their brand, why don't they create a huge style guide and then allow people to buy the brand and create figures on their behalf?
Bingo! Paul's
I
hit
said
on
that.
it. Well, guys, to that I just say this is an interesting time to be a GI Joe collector, because you're being catered to in every other style, fashion, scale, except the one that we bought in the 80s and 90s. Because Hasbro has farmed out the license to Super 7, who are making vintage Star Wars style 5 POA action figures and going gangbusters. I mean, they might not be selling great. I don't know. They seem to be clogging the stores here.
They're on special on BBTS as well.
Sure, but they exist, and they don't seem to be showing signs of slowing down. So clearly, they've sold enough to continue, even though they are now being clearance down. Similarly, the Ultimates wave of figures have dropped. They've now dropped. The second wave is now in hand. That's Flint, Destro, Baroness, Lady J. And mixed reviews, some quality control issues, but they exist. And they are absolute love letters to the cartoon, which is something that a lot of people either have been clamoring for or didn't know they wanted, and now realize, hang on, this is exactly the flavor of GI Joe that I want to be collecting. You've got the classified series, which also has now eclipsed everything else in terms of the GI Joe stable at Hasbro, and rightly so. Why drip feed a line like the O-ring to a select few number of collectors and keep it on life support when you've got this other thing that's just selling like hotcakes to a whole cross section of old school GI Joe fans, new school GI Joe fans, Marvel Legends fans? et al., Black Series fans. Everyone is interested in classified because they're actually on average, on balance, they're very good figures. Very few actual detractors. Okay, so we've got all that stuff, and I'm not even getting into the third-party production stuff. Like, did I mention Mezco? People got their Destros, and my God, like they live up to the hype. They are
Thank God, because
very
mine's
good.
sitting at BBTS.
Oh, bro, have you seen reviews of this toy?
I'm actually purposefully not, because I want to have my own opinions when I open the packaging.
Well, then
So
let me not
I've
spoil
got a
it.
whole
But
thing,
like, I will
planned for
say,
that figure.
like
Yeah.
the break apart weapon
Uh-huh.
strikes the perfect balance between like real world, like technical detail, and then that kind of futurist vibe that Destro's
Ooh.
in Mars Industries should tread. And it's so good. Oh my word. So good. Breaks apart into all its constituent parts, fits into this insert that goes into the case. The insert is removable. Okay, no, I'm giving a mini review already, but like the LEDs, the light up features in the thing, the blast effects, I hate blast effects, but I'm like, these are really good.
Uh-oh. Okay, well then I'm dying to get mine, because it was a long wait for that figure.
Absolutely. About 2 years, I think.
And I got the email the other day to say, hey, cool, like your pre-order is about to be charged. And I was like, oh shit, do I still want this thing? Why do I want this thing? You know, like it's unfamiliar territory, like all this shit. And then I'm like, no, I want it so that GI Joburg can have eyes on this thing. So yeah.
Yeah. So,
And I
okay,
like it. So
bottom line is, if you've got a hankering for G.I. Joe and you're not particularly precious about what scale or what style, you have so much on offer. Except the one thing. The one thing. That's just not in the market.
Well, I think
Where
it's
was I
Also-
going with that? I've lost the thread of my own point.
yes. I was saying they license things out. Lots of people are
Yes,
actually
yeah.
producing GI Joe like toys.
There is an initiative, or at least a sense, that Super 7 wanted to do O-Ring. And Hasbro were like, we'll let you do your reaction stuff. We'll let you do the ultimate stuff. We'll let you do I think it's called Super Cyborg. They did a bat, sort of a large scale, really kind of chibi, not
which is
chibi,
a
deformed.
which is a throwback to the old Shogun Warrior figures that came out in the
There you
70s.
go.
Yeah.
But they were barred from doing the O-Ring, which Brian Flynn
Denied.
had such an interest in taking up, because Hasbro wanted to take a crack at it. I wish, and this is circling back to what you were mentioning, Rob, I wish now the restrictions on Super 7 were lifted and they were able to take a crack at the O-Ring. Because you know that they're going to bring all the unproduced characters to the fore.
Yeah,
That
we'd
is what
probably
Super
get,
7 does.
and it'd be cool. I mean, can you imagine what like a wave, like the first two waves of theirs would look like? Like, I imagine at least that we'd get like the Sunbow heavy hitters. Okay, so we get like Snake Eyes, Duke, Shipwreck, in one wave, for example. I'm just throwing it out, and then you get like Mara, and
Raven,
Raven or something. Maybe not both
the
of them in the
October
same wave,
Guard.
but you get like an October Guard member, and they would throw in all these like weirdos to go in with the regular line stuff. And then with the regular line stuff, they'd probably throw in all these great Easter eggs, like they've been doing with the Super 7 line, with the Ultimates line. That would be awesome, because then it also caters to a niche.
When I
Which
see a
O-rings
rack
are.
of reaction G.I. Joe figures, I squint my eyes and it feels like I'm back in the 80s. Maybe that's the appeal of it. I mean, I've spoken about it before. I did a review of one of them, the Snake Eyes, and it's giving you that carded G.I. Joe nostalgia. That's why a lot of people keep their reaction figures on card, because that's so crucial to the presentation. And if you do keep it carded, the 5 POA doesn't bother you. But there could be so much more. Anyways, guys, I think I'm going to cap off this chat because we do now have, I'd say, almost 100% definitive answers as to where the Hasbro O-ring line is going, and that's nowhere. And I'm going to then ask for a different bit of speculation from both of you, also equally unprompted, unprepared.
Nice, dude. These are
Yo-
fun, man. Let's do it.
Yojo June is coming up. There've been
Whoa.
cryptic messages, like nicely designed incoming transmission, like sort of
It's not a
redacted
dragonfly.
spy messages, hinting at a GI Joe answer to the Cobra Haslab classified scale his tank. What could it be? Paul's just said it's not a dragonfly. What do you base that
Allegedly.
upon? What do you base
Makes you
that
think
upon?
it's
I'm
not.
basing it. Okay, so I'm basing this on some threads in Facebook, some channels that I follow, where on one of them, and I'm not going to name the channels because, quite frankly, I can't remember the name of the channel. But the one guy, they were speculating, or one person was like, "Oh, this is proof that the next Haslab thing is going to be a dragonfly." And one of the guys underneath commented, like, "No, there's actually a guy on this group that is working on those projects, and he's specifically said it's not going to be a dragonfly because apparently that was leaked." And now Hasbro doesn't want to do that. That
So
was
then I
what was
say,
said there. I don't know if that's
so then I
true.
say words are cheap, and of course you're going to throw
Exactly.
some red herrings. Like if you're, because Haslabs don't get vomited out like the weekend of.
No,
Months and months of prep go into the
definitely.
design. Yeah, so if it is a dragonfly, it's been a dragonfly. It's been locked in for a year now. Quite possibly. I'm gonna benchmark it at 12 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Paul, do you really think that these cheap words that are being bantered about on social media
I
actually
just think
hold
it's.
any water?
Oh no, man! I'm just throwing that out because that was like some kind of picked off the floor opinion that I saw on the internet.
All right. Well,
My
we'll circle back to you, Rob.
Yeah.
What is your projection? What do you think they've got in the wings? What is a good counter
Well,
to the his tank?
as a classified vehicle and something that isn't too big, I mean, the Dragonfly really does make sense.
Hmm.
Like, I wouldn't be a Jeep. A Jeep feels like it would be too small, too cheap.
I think it's definitely.
But
gonna be a-
now that you've said Dragonfly, like I really can't think of anything else. I mean,
I think
Shark's
big-
too small. That's
The
too
big
like
counter would
watery.
be the big counter to that, Rob, is if it was a classified vamp, the towable weapons would be the unlocks.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
smart.
And that's
They
one
haven't
thing that
done a
would.
clutch yet.
Yep. And they've proven that they can do that
Haven't
kind
done a
of
wild
weapon.
bull yet.
That's
Yes,
true.
but they have done a cover girl, which then, to my mind, takes the Wolverine off the table because she would have surely have been the unlockable figure or the included figure in the base offering. So
And
I think
also that's
maybe there was
only a missile
chat of the
launcher.
Wolverine, and they then kind of said, no, let's not do the Wolverine, but we've already done all this prep work on the classified cover girl figure, so let's move that through production. That's how, I don't know, my speculation stitches it up in my head.
And I don't think it'll be a tank because I think a tank is too generic. It has to be something that is GI Joe. I mean,
Sure.
thankfully on the Cobra side, it's quite easy. Almost all of it is iconic and identifiable as a Hasbro Cobra vehicle. APC, or is that just too silly?
No, that's just too boring. I think just as a high impact release, I feel it's too boring. Personally, I know a lot of people have love for the APC. It's cool, but let's be honest, it's not as exciting as a vamp, at least not on paper. I think it's a vamp personally.
Right.
And I think it's a vamp because vamp at classified scale is not too big of a vehicle, but there's a lot of cool things they could do to it to make it very interesting. They could make it that you could change out the back, to change out the weapons. So maybe you could have the gun, or you can have it change out to the rocket launchers, or at least you kind of got a weapon that's already been done so that it can do the Cobra version of it as well, which we all know is Stinger. So you got that, and then Steve, you actually dropped a very cool one: towable weapons. The classified line has proven that they can do cool small vehicles. I mean, look at Scrap Iron's rocket launching platform
Holy
that's
hell.
coming out. Looks really amazing. So, like that kind of engineering in a towable weapon, awesome. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, I was holy helling because that is an extremely well engineered, lovely piece. I mean, if
Yeah.
it doesn't, assuming it doesn't fall apart on your desk, it almost makes me look at old scrap iron vintage version with a bit of contempt. I'm like, yeah, how does he get that thing around? You know, is he always having to kind of hop out of
Picks
the
it up.
vehicle, set it up? He picks it
Yeah.
up. I mean, in the comic book, they hand waved it by having it like a hand portable rocket launcher. That's how he, kills the Softmaster and blows up Billy. Spoiler for a 35-year-old comic book. But yeah, it's so cool to make it a tracked separate piece that he's like remote controlling. That's brilliant. Really, really
There,
good.
there is a member here in our chat whose opinion I value very highly when it comes to some of the speculation.
Just one.
I mean, like, no. The reason I value
Guys, we
his-
love you all.
Yeah, but the reason I value his speculation is because he actually does know a lot of what's going on, like for real. And the reason I'm not name dropping him is because I don't want people bugging him on finding him on Facebook and going, "Oh my word, tell us more about this." But yeah, he said one or two things, and I'm inclined to agree with him because he's normally quite on the money with that stuff. So
Well,
What
let's
about
canvass the
Snowcat?
opinions. Snowcat, there was a little red herring. Well, I believe it's a red herring. One of the communiques, sort of in character, the deep cover operative called Agent Longfellow. That's a sort of an internal code name, I guess. Probably Chuckles. Maybe Quick. But he says the cat's out of the
definitely not
bag.
Lady. Definitely not Lady Jail Scarlet.
Man J. Longfellow, hilarious. But the language used was the cat's out of the bag. So that sent a few people spinning off in various directions, thinking maybe it is a snowcat, which would fit the kind of the scaling of the classified hiss. But it's once again, Paul, I'm going to use your term. It doesn't have the same impact because it has that immediate limitation on it as being a coded Arctic vehicle. If you want something to
For
go
sure,
toe-to-toe
but
with
it's
the hiss
very
in any
recognizable,
environment,
though. That's the only thing.
yes, true.
That's
And
a
it's an
GI Joe
astoundingly
vehicle.
good vehicle, but perhaps not one that you can lead with. You need something
Yeah.
more pliable. But in terms of pliable options, the chats have been exploding. I'm going to list a few here. MCDJ, ACDC, or Striker, in my opinion. GI
That could work
Gary,
too.
the tank car with heavy metal. Now, if you're scratching your head, the tank car was a pull back and go motorized vehicle pack from 1988, which is basically like a kiddie cart. So, funny suggestion, GI Gary.
Great fun.
Ryan says the Dragonfly. Excellent suggestion, Ryan. GI Gary counters the Vamp by asking, will Clutch's head stick above the Vamp roll bar at classified scale? Hilarious. Yep. So, and possibly a Silver Mirage using the current motorcycle mold already. Yeah, no, that would be a cheap out option to have that as a Haslab.
They give you two of them, then maybe.
Yep.
Well, I like Dragonfly. I think that's a good option. I think now that you've explained Vamp with towable things, there definitely is something you could unlock till forever. You just keep adding more towable things. It would be cool if you could tow the towable things could tow more towable things. So you could just link them all up. This is one Vamp towing.
The GI Joe train.
Yeah, I think that would be cool.
Well, I guess let's cap this off with a musical rendition. Rob, would you like to sing the lyrics that GI Gary has put on screen?
Oh my goodness. Dead in the water, a toyline in limbo.
I was thinking more along the lines of Smoke on the Water.
Smoke?
I was just going to follow up with another Snake Eyes figure, Guns Akimbo. But that's just
okay. Good. Jeez, Paul, you spitting the rhymes off the cuff.
I'm not word burglar, bro.
Dead in the water, a toy line in limbo. Yeah, there you go.
No.
That's what I was thinking. we are here and we are doing rereads and rewatches of classic
Shot GI
cartoons
Gary.
week to
We're going
week.
crazy.
Yes, thanks for the lyrics, GI Gary.
Month to
And
month, day to
month to
day.
month. And it has kind of put a bit of pep in my step because not only are we doing the old stuff, but we're doing the most recent stuff as well alongside it. And
Whoa.
it's been a fun little exercise. For this week's mission, the guys were tasked with reading for the first time issues 291 to 295, which is a 5-part mini arc called High Stakes. That's the
High
IDW GI Joe:
Stakes.
A Real American Hero series by Larry Hama. And I am curious, gents, did you manage to read these 5 issues? Paul?
Well, it's just one issue that's really just been thinned out over 5, to be fair. It's like one.
Oh, he's coming in hot with the critiques.
Wow.
Sorry,
Yes.
it's just.
Wow.
And also, like, it feels like they're retreading a lot of stuff from the first issue of G.I. Joe.
Oh,
Lady
do tell.
Doomsday, the train.
With the train.
Yeah. I feel
Okay.
like Larry Hama's leaning on stuff he thinks is a cool idea and forgot he realized it was a cool idea. So trying to make it a cool idea again.
Trains
Which
are freaking awesome. It's still it's the best part of that whole story arc.
exactly. In his defense, it's actually the coolest part of that arc. So yeah, it's okay. I mean, nothing really poignant gets told. We've got characters going from A to B. We got a whole bunch of boring panels full of Cobra's freaking casino and a bunch of talky shit that doesn't really matter. Yeah, that would be how I felt about that arc. Is it better than what comes afterwards? It's definitely the red flag for what's coming afterwards. Like if you read that and you were already like your opinion was already that, oh wow, I hope this gets better. Well, I'm sorry, it didn't. For those of you in the future, or in the past, or however
one of
you
my
are
favorite
consuming
things with this arc.
Let's not get ahead of
Every-
ourselves. Rob, won't you give us
Sorry.
give us your opinion on what the events of this 5-issue arc were? Kick us off.
Okay, so randomly they're on a train that has nothing to do with anything else. And Cobra is setting up a casino on Cobra Island, and Jojo needs to know like what is the story with the casino, where they're going with this. And while they're trying to investigate that, we also get a lot of information about the bad guys and revenge and all of that. And we also discover that not Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander is useless. He's not doing anything. Mindbender is kind of resurrecting his programs that he's always had going, but now he kind of has an opportunity to get back to them. So he's trying to bring back to life a version of Serpentor, which he hopes will be a more superior version of Serpentor, as well as that he can control, as well as his own version of Snake Eyes, or at least a Cobra version of Snake Eyes.
And in order to do that, he needs to capture Snake Eyes, subject him to this process, which will then kill the original Snake Eyes, and then give him the ability to create a clone army of Snake Eyeses.
Yes.
They're really leaning into Snake Eyes as this godlike character.
He's the ultimate.
And leaning into that's one of G.I. Joe's like main melodies. But this really just kind of makes it a plot point that Snake Eyes is some kind of unkillable myth. I guess it's with some irony that we as the reader, or at least we should, know that this isn't the real Snake Eyes. That the real Snake Eyes is in fact dead.
Yeah, and we do know that. At least I think you get that point given to you in this story arc. It wasn't confirmed in later story arcs that we've read so far, or at least the next story arc. But this one definitely does straight out say, Snake Eyes is dead. So he's obviously died at some point before this.
Well, I'm going to fight you on that slightly because the insistence on calling Sean Collins Snake Eyes Sean and not Snake Eyes, I think is deliberate to stop the reader from being confused at any point.
Yeah.
Like Scarlet does things that I'm using inside info because I have read the entire series of GI Joe comics. There is a plot point that like Scarlet's like, we need to keep the Sean Collins identity a secret from everyone, because we need Cobra to believe that Snake Eyes never died.
Yeah,
And
they do
yet,
touch on that in this arc too.
oh, do they? Okay, because
Yeah, they do.
in combat, Scarlet is the quickest one to always reference Sean Collins as Sean and not Snake Eyes. So she's breaking her own illusion. But I think that's actually Larry just saying to the reader, don't forget this is not the real Snake Eyes. I'm
It's
not
Sean
trying to
Collins'
hoodwink
trademark.
anyone's. So yes, it's a kind of a meta reason. At least that's my justification.
No,
Well,
that
that
makes sense.
yeah.
That tracks.
Well,
Because for a long time I wagged the finger at this book saying, why is the writing always calling him Sean when they're trying to keep up this pretense? But it's for our benefit.
it's a constant reminder to the reader,
Mm.
the same as in every single issue, 291 to 295. Laura has to ask Dr. Minder what he's doing, and Dr. Minder has to explain himself every single time. Every time you see them together, that's literally all he is doing. Is he's saying, my plans are working. I have these tubes, and I have the memories, and I have the brain scanner. But
And all these
Dr.
monitors.
Mindbender, what are you doing? Well, I have these tubes, and I have my brain scanner, and I'm bringing Japan product to life, and I want to create evil Snake Eyes. But Dr. Mindbender, what are you doing? Well, I have this brain scanner, and I have these tubes.
Okay.
No,
All right.
but Rob's right. And guys, doesn't that remind you? Okay, and I'll give our listeners some insight. In South Africa, we had this. I think it was a Kidio that had this on it, where there was this like duo that had science, and it was like, the one lady character. I think she was like a piggy or something, and there was this like a scientist. They were both like puppets. They had hands up their asses, and they were talking and shit. And then the woman would always be like, Dr. Buggles, what are we doing today? It's like, we're going to have new experiences, because that's what he would call like experiments. And that's exactly what is echoed for me in this, and in that like repetition, that rhythm that comes through with this type of storytelling. It's like, what are we doing today?
I can understand you doing that if you want to remind readers of something that maybe they might have forgotten about from the previous month, because it is a comic book coming out monthly. But that is the purpose. You can't do that style of reminding readers when you have a recap page at the front of every single issue. You have to do one or the other. You can't have a recap page and then have the style of your storytelling recapping the story for the reader as they're reading it.
Yeah,
it feels redundant.
Tedious. Yeah,
it's one or the other. Because I mean, I think that's often why I always feel like, especially in the 90s and 80s, you can literally pick up any issue of a comic book and be caught up and enjoy that story on its own, because the story itself would explain itself most of the time fairly subtly, but kind of or very blatantly catch you up, so that you can enjoy the issue as a standalone thing. But with the advent of recap pages, you don't have to tell stories that way. Since like the early 2000s. I mean, especially I think Marvel picked it up first. DC kind of introduced it, and now most companies, or the big ones, seem to do it too. If you're a recap page, you don't have to do that in every single issue. And can you imagine reading this? I mean, you don't have to imagine. We did it. You've read this entire story arc, which would be sold in a graphic novel. You'd read that entire story in one run. It'd be awful. It was. It was very annoying to have that reminder every single issue.
Rob read the recap and the comic book. Good man.
And the comic book.
So, do you think, is there a meta reason there? Is there not enough plot for the number of issues that lay before Larry?
I think it's true. It's true what Paul said. I think it is stretched out quite a lot across these 5-6 issues. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 issues.
Can you believe that we've been in the same location effectively for 10 issues of comic book?
Yeah.
That's absolutely unheard of.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's been the key location, and everything has been ancillary to the Cobra Casino. And in fact, not even the Cobra Casino, that lab. It's just like Cobra hasn't moved from that spot.
And also, like, it kind of breaks one of Larry Hama's rules that he likes to talk about quite a lot, is how comic books shouldn't be like so super. Okay, rules maybe not the thing, but he does expose this quite a bit in that he says, comics are supposed to always be moving. At least that's always been his style of storytelling. So he doesn't like talking heads too much or major static, moments where there's too much dialogue between 2 or 3 or 5 characters. And somehow he's just managed to lock these guys in this vortex or this time crunch, and it's just very weird to have Larry write like that. It's odd. I mean, that's me being like kind of like super critical on a high, level thing. But I do want to just shine some light on some of the positives because, it is easy to be negative about stuff. It is easy to point out the flaws and things like that, and as human beings, we tend to do that easier than finding the good stuff. And there's a lot of great art in these books.
Gallant is absolutely incredible. His action is always on point.
Totally, and so much so it's so much better than what comes afterwards. Somehow, it's just tighter. It feels tighter. The composition on these panels is better. It's like, yeah, the story might not be that interesting, and we're not moving very much in the story from one place to another. But they're very interesting panels. They're cool looking panels. This is like great portfolio work. Like if I was like, if I say like I mean I don't mean like me as an artist, just like, if I was like a young comic book artist and I'd worked on this page and I had the art director or had Larry directing how these panels go, these would be great. Some of these pages would be great portfolio pages because they carry a lot of action. They carry a lot of smart design in the panels and in the reading flow, and it's cool. Like I enjoyed that stuff a lot, and I liked a lot of the dynamic poses and the characters as well. It's a pretty book, which is just sad because it's like you take it out for dinner and you realize it's just a pretty book. It's not a smart book, and that's the sad thing. Also I've got a bit of a what if kind of thing, and I also think instead of like trying to stretch this moment over 5 books or over 10 books, we could have had a lot more interesting insight into some of the character memory stuff. So they kind of opened up this arc with Snake Eyes' memories from Vietnam. And I thought that I know when that happened, I remember the internet was very excited about this. They were like, this is the best thing they've read in the new books in the last 30 issues or something, which I think is a little bit dramatic, to be fair. But yeah, it was cool. But then it got me thinking, like, well, it would have been interesting to see some other stuff with certain characters, and then have some of these maybe give us like reward us as longtime GI Joe fans by giving us insight into stuff,
something new.
in these moments. Yeah, something new.
Well,
Reward
I
us.
think the internet exploded over an issue of Untold Tales, which we are going to get into in the next 5 issues, because we are reading, in case you weren't aware, listener, we're reading the modern GI Joe series in reverse. We started with All In, we're now doing High Stakes, and next up I think will be Untold Tales, where yes, we do get an extended period, an entire issue's worth of time spent in Vietnam with a new story. Or basically untold aspects
Well, that's kind of
of
cool.
the classic story.
The
So that's what
concept
the
of
internet exploded
Dawn.
about, Paul.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the concept of Dawn kind of having these little like memory breaks was interesting. If we could have
It's
just
the most
focused more.
interesting part of it. I love that. I'm less enamored with the fact that like she figures she can quick fix herself by jumping into the brainwave scanner and like moving the files over, copy delete, moving them onto Sean. It's like, but the idea of Dawn having this warring personality inside her, needing expression, it's interesting, not least of all because she starts having a kind of a romantic sense for Scarlet. She does flashbacks to the time when Snake Eyes and Scarlet were on the Staten Island ferry, getting attacked by Crimson Guards. I mean, what could be more romantic? That was issue 36, All Ships at Sea. When you're good, you're good. Anyway, that was an interesting dimension to the character. That like Snake Eyes is inside her, and it it could potentially eclipse her own personality.
Yeah,
Interesting
it's
stuff.
it's interesting kind of see these conflicting emotions. Yeah,
So why
that
don't they
would have
give
been
us
cool to
a
explore that
spin-off?
more.
Why don't they give us a spin-off Dawn run? That could be fun. Anyway,
Well,
do
maybe
the Marvel thing,
they already did it.
guys.
Paul?
Sorry,
But
Rob.
this is a Dawn and Sean kind of palaver. Those characters are always pushed to the fore. I don't know if
Yeah,
a
true.
spin-off like Dawn in her introduction, Dawn of the ARAH, or sorry, not her introduction, but her kind of acceptance into the GI Joe team, and they do go off and do stuff in Japan, and she does a kind of an origin story and a kind of a who am I story. It
So
also
that has
serves to, I
happened.
think,
It just hasn't happened for me and Paul yet.
no.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're
Robert?
gonna get some Dawn. Don't worry.
I cut you
Ah.
off, my guy. Sorry, man.
Oh no, not at all. I was just gonna say probably my favorite part of the comic book is actually just the visual of them using bats to do menial tasks at the casino. I thought that was really funny. They kind of like dress them up in like coats and shit, and they're working in the kitchen. They're making the food. They're moving stuff around, and I just thought that was funny. That's probably my favorite idea from this entire story arc was just seeing bats like making food for people. I thought that was really funny.
And these are fembats. These are like very
But not just them though.
attractive,
They used actual
salty
bats.
females.
Yeah, no, the
Oh.
fem bats, but the actual bats were used in several of those panels, if I remember correctly, like in the
Yes.
background.
I do recall looking at those panels and thinking, oh, I think SL Gallant was using a 25th anniversary bat as his reference because
Ah.
it's got that additional detail on the back that's picked out in silver.
Yeah, so I thought that
cool.
was a really cool detail. They kind of like just peopled them around essentially,
Cool
which I quite
observation, dude.
enjoyed. Yeah, it's probably my favorite thing about the whole story
I
arc.
totally feel like we've spoken about this comic way too much now.
Oh, more than it
highs and
needs.
lows and
Mit
ratings.
Liefde, but yeah.
Actually, we'll skip the highs and lows. I feel like we can't visit them.
Yeah, we have. I mean, I
But
just gave
if,
mine.
if there is an individual high point or an individual low point, feel free to shout it out before you're reading. I mean, you're rating.
You're reading. Well,
Reading.
the train scene was my high point, and I really enjoyed the use of bats in the background.
Same.
Low point was just having it. I mean, it's like here, Laura asking Dr. Biomander again, "What are you doing?" Oh well, these are
I have
my
experiences.
tubes and my brain scanners. What are you doing? This is what I'm doing. I mean, every single issue is just stuck there. Yeah, I didn't enjoy this arc at all, and it's kind of like lackluster as like a way to build up to the next part of the story. It's like, oh, so this is how they got there. That's boring. I'm gonna give it a 2. This entire arc,
Like
really boring.
and for me, admittedly, it started off as like a strong 3, and it kind of became a 2 by the end of the arc because I just felt like I'd read the same thing 3 times. That's kind of what it felt like to me. Yeah. So
Well, then I'm going to go with you guys and give it a 2 across the board.
Whoa.
Because I'm just a cipher. I'm basically you. I'm guiding you through this journey backwards in time.
we can only go up, right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I initially like the high point for me being Dawn's crisis of memory and of personality was interesting and needed more teasing out. But just the running in place hurts this arc, man.
Yeah, they didn't explore that enough. Like it starts out strong, but then it kind of goes into the into like the
Recycle mode.
like, yeah, and he needs
zone.
to get to the next thing next, essentially.
It's as if the shadow of 300 loomed so large that for at least 10 issues preceding it, we were dealing with setup, and there just wasn't enough setup
almost
for
a
10
year.
issues worth. Yeah.
It's a year of him being like, "What do I do with these 10 issues? I know you want to end at 300, but I
and
don't
you've
have
got
enough
an
to fill these
idea for where you want to get to by then, but like really there are too many steps, and not
between
enough
here and there.
material to donate to each step.
And that's
to
very
adequately
counter to
make
his
for,
style as well. Yeah.
Is it? I don't know.
Well, that's
Yeah,
what he
look,
says. He likes to write blind, and have things happen as they happen. So he doesn't plan
yeah.
out his arcs. So
I think we've seen
maybe,
perhaps
yeah,
a rare instance of where he had an idea of where he wanted to end 300 on, and having to then just fill in the steps, which is not perhaps Larry's strong suit. It's better
yeah,
to be organic and just see where this whirlwind of storytelling winds up, because otherwise you do get the situation where you are stagnating for 10 issues, waiting to drop your kind of your major beats. Anyhow, let's move on to
Anywho's.
some cartoons. I
Whoa.
tasked you guys with
Cartoons.
I tasked you guys with watching Renegades,
Oof.
episode
Oh.
5.
The
I forget what it was entitled. The Package, yes.
Package.
The package.
The bagage.
Cobra is
Package.
Amazon in this episode. They are
That
a
tracks.
massive mail order service called S Market. They've got a warehouse and delivery trucks. And
Siblings
they
market.
they want to send a package to Elvin Kibbe, aka the Coyote.
Oh.
GI Joe intercept the package, determine that it's a bomb, and enlist
It's a bomb!
Elvin's aid in taking down Cobra.
It's a
They-
bomb.
Elvin is a former employee at S-Mart, now working as a
Shop
college
smart,
professor,
shop smart.
and
Apparently,
clearly
you can-
voiced by John Oliver. I don't know if you know John Oliver from the
Yes. John
what's it
Oliver
called?
show.
The Today
Last
Show.
Week Tonight with John Oliver.
Last week tonight.
Sounds just like him. Anyway, so they try and enlist his aid to crack the code of this scanning device to try and basically implicate Cobra in a massive arms smuggling operation. Because yes, Amazon is used to sell guns and bombs and bio vipers and move
That's
them
what
around
I've
the
been
country.
buying from them.
Yeah, exactly. But throw one particular one-eyed mercenary into the mix, and you've got quite a thrilling little renegade story. I don't know,
Well,
Paul. What did you think of this one?
two-eyed
Rob, what did you
until the
think
end
of
of his origin story.
Oh,
I think overall,
yeah.
yeah, this is his origin story. So we get introduced to Blood, and by the end of the episode, he wants revenge on them for blowing up a factory in his face. I actually kind of enjoyed this episode.
Should have
It
seen it
was
coming.
pretty by the numbers, but it was still a lot of fun to watch as it went along. It kind of opens with action. They're being chased.
Nice and
They're getting
Zentaro
chased
comments.
right at the start.
It's an
Yeah.
episode about mail order service called The Package. Sounds smutty. That's,
It's true.
as you were saying, Rob.
Well, I think overall it's a fun episode. I mean, it starts on action. I mean, there's hardly any downtime, but when you get downtime, it's more just to catch your breath, essentially. You know, they kind of go and meet with him in his dorm room, and then we get back to the action after that. Overall, yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. Some nitpicks that I have. I found it fascinating that Duke has explosives expertise, but Tolerat does not.
Yes, thank you. That annoyed the shit
That
out of
was
me
probably
too.
the biggest thing that I was irritated by. Was that they have the package? They're like, "Oh, guys, it's explosive," and Duke's like, "I gotta deactivate the thing," and Tolerat's like, "Oh God, whoa, wow!" And
That
then
was a
Duke,
weird moment, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
like
Tunnel Rat not stepping up to the plate with any kind of explosive knowledge. Duke being the Boy Scout. Like, did the writers
explosives
not
dude.
have access to the file cards? Did they not bother to research that far?
And the
Apparently,
action figure comes with an
Oh, the action
robot.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally. And
Yeah.
also, like,
like
Roadblock in
Death
that
March.
scene is kind of weirdly written because, okay, there's a bomb in your vehicle. That should have everyone's attention straight away. But Scarlet, like, Duke wants Roadblock's gum because he wants to, I suppose, fix it on a certain point in the bomb and keep it from blowing up. And Roadblock's like, huh? He's like aloof. Scarlet has
Yeah,
he
he's
holds up the
really aloof.
wrapper. He's like, what do you want, Duke? And Scarlet has to reach into his mouth and grab the gum because Scarlet knows a bit about explosives, whereas Roadblock and Tunnel Rat are in the dark apparently. And I just thought,
Yeah,
no man, that is strange little passage. Firstly, Tunnel Rat having no explosives training is one thing, but Roadblock like being in a bit of a dwal. That's South African slang for he's just kind of looking out the window, not really focused on what's going on. And
Daydreaming.
Scarlett's like, hello, give him the gum. Weird.
Do it. So that was a funny
So that
moment.
got my attention
I really
as well.
enjoyed the fight between Blood and Snake Eyes. I thought that was very cool
Yes.
on the flag-sized top of the truck.
vehicle.
Yeah.
Cobra X2.
It was
I
a
think
very
they
cool
call it.
fight scene. Like other than me noticing that the top of the truck was suddenly the size of a football field.
It's amazing
but
what a
other than
camera
that-
lens does, huh?
Blood
very
gets
cool.
bested in that fight simply because Roadblock is able to trip him up with the sort of gun turret.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But then they have a rematch later, Snake Eyes and Blood, in the warehouse, and Snake Eyes is bested.
Yeah, he
Did-
loses.
He loses.
Yeah, he's
Which is
like
cool.
left bloody and on the ground after that explosion.
And bold.
He's not invincible. That's also a cool thing about this episode. You know, you get to see it's not him being more vulnerable, but him not being completely invincible.
Yeah.
And
He's
you know,
correct,
Blood
yeah.
Blood meets him toe to toe. Like Blood, like Snake Eyes obviously pulls hand-to-hand weapons like a sword on the top of the vehicle, and Blood pulls out he calls it his pig sticker. So they go toe to toe with blades, and I'm like, Blood is fighting Snake Eyes to a standstill. This is awesome.
It is awesome.
It was a
Yeah,
lot of
and-
fun.
And it's freaky. And also, like let's not forget Blood's awesome car.
Oh, they definitely gave Thunder Machine vibes to Major Blood.
So cool.
We couldn't waste
Why
this
didn't we get
vehicle on
that
the
toy?
boring ass dreadnoughts. Let's give this souped up muscle car with like rocket packs to Blood. Brilliant.
So
But
the
then
one
he wastes it. Like his big
wastes it,
plan
yeah.
is to rear end, like ram an armored car, okay? Because the
Mhm.
armor sleeve had kind of come down. That this this vehicle, this Cobra truck, can kind of go full on mobile assault command, mobile armored assault. Huh? Is it armored? Mask. Basically, it can kind of engage shields and has a top turret. And Major Blood decides, okay, I'm gonna hit the NAS canister and ram this thing, and then eject a seat onto the top of it. Like Major Blood is the baddest.
he is
He
badass.
is so cool in this. I
Very
really enjoyed
cool.
him a lot.
I think so. You guys, this also highlights like the one low point I have for this episode, and then also a big question that I feel doesn't get answered properly, and also like my pet peeve throughout the entire run is that Cobra APC that they're driving around in that van. It's
Mhm.
like Knight Rider, or it's like Kit.
Oh, I can do
You know,
anything.
that thing's like Kit. You know? And it exactly,
It has
and it just
comedic technology to allow it to change its, I suppose, paint job. It doesn't really
Yeah.
do anything to change the make and model and shape of the vehicle. But yeah, it can kind of adopt a different skin.
so like that's fun. I just feel like
And that's
know-
enough to fool Flint.
Yeah.
He's like, they can't hide a truck like that in plain sight. It's like, they just
Well,
didn't
Yeah.
tell. They
There's
just
like
gave it
half a
different
dozen of
paint
those
job.
trucks. Why didn't you just check every single truck that looks
So-
like it?
It's
My
like the
thing-
old adage when like a vehicle needs to lose the cops, so it goes into like a spray shop and comes out, and hey, it's a different vehicle.
Grand Theft Auto, baby.
There you go.
But the thing that bugs me about it is that if I was a kid and I was looking at this and kind of going, you know how it is in South Africa, we would often see the toys on the shelves and then the cartoon would come out, and I'm sure it's like that in the States as well. Maybe it's a bit better timed. But and imagine like I was like I had all of the pocket money in the world and I could actually buy that first wave up. I would probably just skip over getting the APC maybe in thinking, oh, that's kind of a boring bad guy vehicle. And then you actually find out, no, it's the kit of the series. You know, it does this and that and the next thing. It's so freaking amazing. It's so freaking amazing that Cobra can't even like lock onto a geolocation device on the vehicle itself and disable it, but whatever's. I don't know why Cobra has just never done that. Why they don't just track the vehicle if they want to
But
find these guys? It's their vehicle, you know.
at one point, there's a plot point that Kibby accidentally triggers it, and that's how Baroness is able to guide Blood to intercept the
Back
vehicle.
to them. Yeah.
Exactly right.
But I think, Paul, you're hinting at like maybe Cobra should have also had like a automatic lockout system.
Yep.
Yeah, the thing
And
is
You could
pretty
remotely
advanced.
switch it off.
And also, Major Blood could have hacked that vehicle. He could have like gone behind them, hacked it, locked it down, and still done his whole ram it into its ass thing and flip over and shoot stuff. You know, I just feel like there's like, you know, Cobra is this huge like organization in the series that is so technologically superior and has this, that, and the next thing. But yet everybody that tries to stop the Joes behaves like a barbarian. They don't use that technology to their like sort of advantage. It's weird. It's the weirdest thing. And another observation, and I'm sorry, I'm fast forwarding a little bit now, but another observation I want to make. I don't know why this didn't really bug me so much when it originally came out, and I think it's just because I wanted the show to succeed. You know, as a lot of us did, possibly because we're just so hungry for GI Joe to do well, as we are still now to greater or lesser degree. But the gel like
We're
Cobra,
older and jaded now. We're like, GI Joe succeed.
Everything's
Whatever.
but the
Everyone's
Bio
gonna
Vipers.
die.
I feel like the Bio Vipers are just weirdly ahead of their time because, and hear me out, I think it's a good concept. I just think that's one of the reasons that this has subconsciously, this is one of the reasons it's failed. Because if you try to like think about the severity of these things, they're actually quite nasty. Like it's a really cool concept. You can make horror movies based on these things. You could make these as great sci-fi villains in a sci-fi movie. Just somehow they're not hitting the right notes in this series. Like, I feel like they should have just been robots. Yes, it would have been more sort of primitive in a lot of ways, but I feel like it would have been more tactile and somehow more enjoyable for viewers.
Seeing gelatinous blue baddies on screen doesn't feel like GI Joe. Sure,
Yeah, it's
I
not
get
exciting.
you. I get you, Paul. And it does kind of make it feel Ben 10-ish. It feels like a different cartoon when I'm watching them getting splattered and blow apart. I mean, maybe it's easy to animate. Certainly, like technical detail, mechanical detail, exploding is perhaps
It's a pain.
more of a draw on animators' resources than just having a kind of a flat blue splatter on screen.
Agreed, but
Maybe
they do
that's
use a lot of CG in this show, so
true.
they could have
true,
just made them 3D models. So that's the other
okay.
thing. I mean,
Yeah, no,
they do the
I
3D
return
model
to
thing
that
well.
point. That blue goo does not a interesting baddie make, but it is interesting that they are shipping them across the country because this Amazon front S market has them like boxed up in containers at one point, and Major Blood kind of explodes the containers and out pop the Bio Vipers to assault the Joes.
Which is,
That's
it's also interesting because by the fifth episode, they've obviously worked out a lot of the kinks that were an issue with them in the two-parter. Because now they kind of have like a
humanoid
design
form
on their face.
and
Yeah.
they keep weapons like internally. They each kind of pull out a gun out of their sort of mass. And the guns look a lot like the launchers that you got for the nano weapons in Rise of Cobra.
Yes,
Like occasionally you'd get a figure that had a gun that you could put one of those little translucent green nano bombs into.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's beside the point.
fun.
That's neither here nor there. Did you notice that Tunnel Rat wielded gunchakas? Hey, Paul? It kind of had an over and under barrel, and he was kind of holding it in the middle. Very, very Star-Lord. And it was kind of firing out of
very
both
recoil.
top and bottom. Yes, recoil.
Yeah.
That was exactly what I thought of when I saw him shoot that. Yeah, cool, man.
But overall, like, I really enjoyed it, and I think I don't, guys. I think we're ready to get into our highs and lows of this episode.
For sure. I have one more question
Sweet.
though. Do you
for
imagine
it.
there was a brief in the writers' room at the outset of this show that every episode needed an A-team sequence? Because here it feels kind of forced. The Joes are low on
Yes.
ammo. They're skulking through the storefront of this S market, and they've got like camping goods and like a ball shooter, like for a batting cage. At one point, Duke fires a an arrow, a flaming arrow, and hits, I don't know, a canister, explodes.
Yeah, in my mind, it's the Home Alone thing, but yeah, totally.
It's
That's
very much the A-team moment.
Yeah, come on, Paul. Surely Home Alone is less prominent than the A-Team reference.
yeah, but I
Definitely.
didn't watch that much. I mean, yes, and I mean, in my mind, like I said, it just always rings true of Home Alone, booby trapping, blah blah blah. But yes, it is the A-team thing, very much so. And it's always that I love it when a good plan comes together kind of thing, you know. So it is that. It's exactly that. I mean, we had that in the last episode as well. So
Very
it
deliberate.
is.
Yeah.
Mm.
Teaching the town how to fight back. I do have an observation, and I'm going to wonder how many times this particular trope will play out. So in the previous episode, what the kind of sheriff of the town needed in order to kind of win the fight against Zartan was Scarlet stepping in and saying, "No, he's got this." And then in this episode, Kibby sits down at the sort of Cobra computer and he's like trying to hack the code. He's like, "Oh, I can't do this."
Hack the
And Scarlet's
Gibson.
like, "You can do this because I believe in you." And then the
Oh.
very next attempt, he cracks the code.
I got a boner and I can hack better.
What happened? So I'm starting to see an uneasy little, like almost rabbit's foot, that all you need to succeed in life is like a hot chick saying,
You can
I
do
believe.
You can
"Yeah."
do it. You can do
We'll
it.
see how many more instances where Scarlet is the kind of the overpowering, I don't know, force.
News.
Yeah, the muse, very good. Kind of just whispering
Yeah.
in these techies' ears.
She
And
is serendipity.
like the end feels very contrived. Like Kibby's like, "Okay, I need to go and hide it now. My life is over." He seems pretty upbeat about it. It's an opportunity to turn over a new leaf. I'm like, okay, you're just gonna have to leave your job at the university, the desert university, I believe it's called. Interesting.
Yeah. Good lord.
And go on the run because Cobra now wants you dead. I mean, they wanted you dead before you hooked up with the GI Joes or the Renegades. Now you're definitely on their hit list.
Yeah.
And then they kind of, I shudder to think, but I don't think he's a recurring character. I think they leave him behind. It's like, cheers, sort yourself out.
Now you're a breaker.
Now you're
Yeah,
a
we
breaker.
just ruined
But
your
also
life.
Coyote.
Well, they take the coyote flag of his backpack and attach it to the vehicle, which now is called the Coyote, I presume.
It's definitely going to be
Ah.
much easier to camouflage yourself when you have a flag that can't change.
Very good, very good. Do you guys remember the concept case where this
Concept?
vehicle was the GI Joe concept case back in I'm
Oh.
thinking 2012?
Yes, the
Well,
Comic Con. That whole
they
vibe.
wanted to make this vehicle. I think eventually some of the tooling found its way into Jurassic Park. But yeah, way back when. Wait, am I confusing toy lines? Was it Jurassic Park? Isn't Jurassic Park Mattel?
No, but there was that weird crossover thing. Remember
Jurassic
they
World?
they did these dinosaur kind of spin-off figures for Jurassic Park or Jurassic World
Maybe they made it into a Marvel toy or something, like Captain
or
America
something.
wagon.
Must have been.
Because
Yeah.
they wanted to make the Coyote, and it was a sweet looking mock-up or model, whatever they were using in that concept case. But yeah,
Damn,
on.
dude, that's like I totally forgot about that actually until you brought it up now. Damn,
It
nice.
happened.
Well
That
done.
was the case that had the 50th anniversary. What became released as the 50th anniversary Gung Ho. So remember, in the 25th anniversary, we had that sort of a bit of a gangly Gung Ho, and they never really fleshed him out and gave him the bulk he needed until that concept case version, which then was shuffled into the
Let's
50th
start.
anniversary. And there was
the concept case. Oh god, yeah.
the really amazing Destro, which also became a 50th anniversary, and then saw re-release in the retro carded collection not too long ago. This is a modern Destro. Anyway, I'm thinking out loud, clearly.
I
Let's.
just remembered something.
Did you remember
What?
something? What did you remember?
I did remember
Unless
something.
the oven's still
But no. It's something that refers to our O-ring conversation early on, which is why I just want to quickly go back into this episode and then just list off my highs and lows quickly. My first high is I love that design of Major Blood. So like this design has very love it or hate it designs. I feel there's very little middle ground. The Zartan is very much a hate it design, but the Major Blood is spot on. Like I think he is super rad. I'd have loved that toy. I would have loved. I still would think it if Hasbro could find a way to incorporate some of those design elements into a future Major Blood design a figure. So that was cool. Major Blood's car. I'm sure you guys can see where I'm going with this. These have been major high points for the episode. And then just generally for me, I thought the episode was fun from beginning to end. Despite the weird hokiness, at least it was just fun. I mean, there was dumb things. There were things that annoy us as fans, like, um, I nearly called him Tripwire. Things like Tunnel Rat not having his EOD specialty. That kind of thing is like really annoying. But it just disappears into the smoke of everything, and it just ends up still being a fun episode to watch, and certainly better than what we got last week. And I do remember when this came out back in the day, I felt like, yay, this was really cool, and I think everybody was just really excited about this episode. So yeah, so for me, this one goes back up into the 4 out of 5 territory.
Wow.
Wow.
Personally.
Nice.
So yeah.
Paul
So
loves this
that was
episode.
cool. And
Yeah,
also,
Rob,
it's
where's
cool
our
when-
spreadsheet, man? I want to
Where's
see
our
this.
spreadsheet?
I've been doing this the whole time.
Well, one of these days you need to bring it up on screen, so we need to take a look,
it
check
out.
ourselves,
Check
yeah.
it
my
out.
check ourselves before we
Check
wreck
ourselves
ourselves.
out.
And you
What were your
guys,
highs and
what-
lows, dude?
My highs and lows. I think the high is that Major Blood is fucking awesome. I like the whole episode is fun. It's action packed. It's a good time overall. Low points are just like nitpicks essentially. It's like him not having EOD, as Paul said. Him becoming Breaker. I was just like, oh, you don't have to give everyone a bloody nickname the whole time. I thought that that's a bit like forced. But yeah, overall, I think it's a fun episode. It like, kind of like goes back to being fun, because there's action packed from start to finish. It just feels like a good episode. And I probably enjoyed the most out of the episodes we've had so far. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 5. It's
Wow.
my favorite episode of
Going deep, Rob.
what is this
Nice.
called again?
The
Renegades
Renegades.
so far. Hell yeah.
Oh, GI Joe Renegades. Sorry, it's not the.
Yeah.
But Rob, the reason they give out the code names and the reason it feels so strange and disjointed and not earned as a moment is because I believe in season 2 they were going to go back to each of these accomplices and ask them, "Do you want to join the GI Joe team? We need your
Oh,
expertise."
for sure. I do
gonna draw
understand
these-
it as a long-term thing, but as you're watching it now, as it's happening, I'm just like, okay.
My question to the both of you then is, does
Mhm.
this concept work? This idea that you can draw civilians into GI Joe for their special skills. It has a very Paul Aller GI Joe IDW series flavor to it, in which I think Roadblock wasn't a soldier initially. These are like resistance fighters pulled from society. But here, why is there a need for a resistance? Is Cobra that prolific? I guess we'll find out. Has it taken over the United States? The mind wonders where this could have ultimately have gone, and it's such a tease. I think I've just answered my own
Yeah.
question. That's the only conceivable reason why
That's-
you'd use people from the civilian walks of life, is if G.I. Joe was forced to go underground and like fight this battle from within. Flint would obviously join forces. Lady J would be in there. We'd get a few actual soldiers joining
Real
the ranks.
soldiers.
But then the bulk will be made up of guys like Alvin Kibbe, aka Breaker, Tech Weenie,
And those hospital people, who are they?
yeah, the vets. I think it was Steeler. The one
Yeah.
guy probably gave off a bit of a clutch vibe. So they snuck in some OG-13s there. So yeah, a bunch of veterans would be also the bread and butter of this new G.I. Joe unit.
Doc.
Doc,
Doc
of
Greer.
course.
Yeah.
He was in episode 3.
Mm.
Yeah, the same one.
Rage.
Rage. Yeah, very good.
Rage.
I'm gonna give it to 3 as well.
Wow.
I did not dislike this episode.
Cool.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Let's talk about Jungle Trap.
But before we get to Jungle Trap,
Oh.
Paul's
Oh
just
my
got something
goodness.
to say, and I can't believe I haven't
Oh,
said
yeah.
this in 2 episodes. I feel like such a moron. There is
You're
talk
an-
about Mattel and Hasbro joining forces to do like crossovers with their toy lines. Most
Word.
notably, Motu and GI Joe, and also Motu and
Renegades.
Ninja Turtles. But obviously, Ninja Turtles, that's with them and Playmates toys.
This is just
So
speculation at this point. The only
it is
confirmed
speculation.
stuff was like Barbie, Monopoly, and is it Transformers Uno?
There you go. So whatever.
Transformers Uno. Jesus.
I don't know. No, I don't think it's Transformers.
I know, you're
But
just putting... But yeah.
Hasbro
But
owns Monopoly, and obviously Mattel is Barbie. So to throw Barbie onto a Monopoly box, that's why this is happening, guys. I don't know if we're going to get crossover action figures,
no,
but please,
I
Paul,
know.
as an academic exercise, go ahead.
But yeah, but chance to dream, right? So, the thing is, right, a line of GI Joe Motu crossovers would mean that the GI Joe stuff, the Motu stuff, would have to come into the GI Joe scale, and then obviously they would put GI Joe stuff in Motu world as well. So that would be, and maybe that's a future plan for O-rings. Maybe Hasbro's sort of saving their load for that. I mean, if it happened, maybe that's a plan. Maybe that's something they want to do. Because
Yeah,
I can,
Duke with a massive chest and like a furry loincloth. Awesome.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hey, listen, guys, there's a very cool Ninjor from Motu. Is an awesome ninja figure. So I can totally see like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow sort of in the Motu line. I can see a lot of GI Joes being very interesting Motu figures, especially if they lean into the sort of Eternia side of things with some of the weaponry. But I'm more curious to see what happens when the Motu stuff comes into the O-ring side of things, because then we'd have like an O-ring He-Man, Skeletor, Man-at-Arms, etc. And that could be quite a lot of fun. I think that could be really awesome and a really good way to kind of introduce Motu fans into that world. And I think
Paul, O-ring is
Yeah.
dead.
It won't be
I
O-ring,
know,
though,
right?
was
I
about to
know.
say.
But-
It'll be
but that's
classified.
But that's why I get you. But that is, I mean, nobody is posting mock-ups of classified classified styled Motu figures, which to me kind of feels like, everybody wants to be heard on them making them as O-rings to kind of go with the classic feel, the classic
It
vintage
would
feel.
make more sense because, I mean, technically they already have classified type figures. I mean, yes, they aren't to scale to the classified figures, but I mean, especially like the cartoon, the
the Masterverse stuff
the
is
Kevin
sort of
Smith
more
stuff is more modern, as it were.
yeah, it's more human in terms of its articulation.
Yes.
So that's
Mr.
interesting.
Motu.
Well, Paul, have
I'm-
you ever seen the reaction Masters of the Universe figures? If you're curious
have
to
seen
see,
it.
to
Yeah.
see a Skeletor and a He-Man in GI Joe scale, there you go. But I would.
I've also seen Fantastic
prompt
Customs, man.
anyone listening to this, yes, of course. O-ring GI
Yeah.
Joes repainted and remocked up to be Skeletor and He-Man. I think we've all seen
So
something
cool.
like that floating on the internets. Very cool, very cool. Lovely to see. I'd be very interested in something like that. But if you want some speculation and some fun banter about this exact topic, I mean, it's funny you should mention it, Paul, but like it was addressed on the most recent Audible Interlude podcast.
Ooh.
Those three guys, they pitched their ideas for like GI Joe in Eternia, and then vice versa. Eternia kind of collapsed into the GI Joe world. And it is, they don't title their episodes, so it's basically called 19 May 2023. And they don't do an episode they don't do an episode description either, so like you really just need a code, punch in the code 19 May 2023, and that is the episode that will discuss Motu and GI Joe.
I must give that a
crossovers.
listen.
Do it,
wild.
man. There's some interesting ideas, some stepping far outside the box, like into space territory box.
Oh god, that's where toys go to die.
And
Anyway, let's not fall into
The
that
new
trap, but
invention.
instead let's fall into the jungle trap.
Oh, classic
yes.
Sunbow episode, the jungle
So
trap.
good.
Guys, the first thing that slapped me right in the face was
India.
this episode was penned by Paul Dini.
Yep.
If that name rings a bell, good for you. You've absorbed a little bit of cartoon stuff. Yes, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm co-created the animated Batman series from 1992, which is probably the most prominent
Absolute
piece of work.
genius.
But Paul
I'm
Dini
so glad I
as a
share a
writer,
name with him.
Paul Dini as a writer for cartoons. Let's put it this way: you could probably more easily list. It's probably a shorter list of cartoons that he hasn't had a hand in than cartoons that he has, because his resume reads very long. However, I'm going to say this as my opening remark on Jungle Trap. I feel like this episode could have been written by AI. It is the most by the numbers GI Joe plotline of all time, I think, and that's
I
saying a
think
lot
it's
because
also
a
his
lot
first
of
cartoon job, dude. If I'm not
he
mistaken.
had stuff in the late 70s. That's
Did
where
he?
he started out. Yeah.
Oh wow, I thought he was from the 80s because Bruce Timm got his start on GI Joe and He-Man, and then he basically told Sambo to F off as he did with Formation.
As a tab on my mobile, I have his resume, or at least his television credits, as far as
Oh,
Wikipedia
cool.
is concerned. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll from 1979 is the first credit that they list.
Ever.
So he was
Cool.
he was a good
He's been
5
around.
years into the industry before he wrote for GI Joe. But still, I mean, GI Joe isn't his most notable work. This is kind of a one-off for him, or a couple of episodes, a handful of episodes that he wrote. And this one, as I say, feels the most generic to me. It has science guy kidnapped by Cobra, right from under GI Joe's nose. In fact, like GI Joe basically tracked him down for Cobra. Like GI Joe in plain sight is walking through the streets of India, right up to this
India, inverted commas.
And then Cobra pounds. They're like, "Oh, thanks for tracking him down for us, GI Joe," because Joe is in uniform. Like Duke's like striding.
But dude, they're kind of there already as well.
Yeah.
Like,
they
but
were.
Cobra's kind of there already because Santan's all like, "I'll tell you a robot's name."
Well, it's really nice that Cobra don't kill them. They're just like, we have what we came for. Cobra, run away.
Dead to rights in the middle of an open courtyard. Cobra can't hit the broadside of a barn. I mean, they've surrounded GI Joe and they're caught in the crossfire, and nobody gets.
There's a lot of white people in India. Just putting that out there.
The animation is weird in that regard.
It's
Yeah,
so
they
weird.
decided to not darken the complexions of the background characters.
There's one or two
Very
that have a
strange.
darkened complexion, which is like
Maybe they meant
it's not
Indiana.
Right. Yeah, possibly. But
yeah, generic scientist guy who then doesn't, I don't think really has a function, because Cobra clearly already has the MacGuffin.
They had all the
They've-
parts.
Right?
No, but it was like
The
all
Vulcan
designs. We've got the
machine.
parts. No,
I've got the vehicle, but I need the driver.
Right. Very good. So they needed to assemble from that ramshackle pile of parts. They needed the scientist
because
to
apparently
put the kit together.
And they clearly took that
Okay.
thing from like Teletron, pulled it up from like the Ark or whatever it is, and then because I love how like goofy their stuff is, man. Sorry,
GI Joe
it's just-
plunge into the jungle to try and rescue the Doctor. They get shot down from their They get shot down from their dragonflies.
one of them being a
by
three-seater.
Swarms of
Three-seater,
three-seater dragonfly piloted by Scarlet and Snake Eyes, and who was in the backseat? Recondo.
Yeah,
We're in the back there. Very cool. It's with some irony that Recondo becomes the Tiger
pickle
Fly
driver.
pilot
Yeah,
in 1988. But anyways, that's we can't think of that. That wasn't in the minds of the writers back in 84, 85. And then, as I say, this very generic kind of sequence plays out where G.I. Joe has to brave the perils of this jungle. Snakes and crocs and some man-made perils. Cobra traps like deadfalls and stakes, and kind of a clearing that has a bunch of lasers pointed at the center of the clearing, which Recondo catches wise to. I really like the fact that when you trip these traps, like that one in particular, it's not with impunity. Like, it does trigger something in the Cobra nerve center. because that's often a kind of failing of these writings. It's like, yeah, surely if the laser defense system has been activated, something's got to go off back at HQ. It can't just be like
somebody's got to know.
either
Yeah.
it zaps the guys or it doesn't. And if they get away scot-free, then they get away scot-free. So that was a strength to me, that these actions had consequences. But yeah, I mean, at one point, the Joes are being charged down by a rhinoceros, and Riconda's able to kind of pull the rhinoceros, well, not pull him physically, but like distract the rhinoceros and have it plunge off a cliff into
Go
a
swim,
river.
Rhino.
Hey, funny stuff.
It's the poor rhino. I mean, shame.
And of course, there was
hyenas.
a disguise sequence where they capture a water moccasin
Oh,
and
that
take
was
on
very
the
cool.
blue shirts
Yeah.
uniforms. But once again, just absolutely by the numbers GI Joe writing. I'm gonna stop harping on that, guys. Do you think Ricondo was actually the leader of this mission? It felt
Yeah.
like it to me.
It definitely was the most focus. The character
I
was the
don't think
most
he was the
focused. Yeah.
leader, but he obviously knew the most about being in a jungle. So they kind of
Yeah,
like
this
left
was
it
his
to him to
episode.
lead them through there.
Yeah.
Duke
I
was
think
there,
he's still in charge.
but Duke really took a backseat towards the end. Like once we were
Yeah.
into the jungle sequences, it was Ricondo's show all the way.
Welcome to
Like
the
Duke
jungle.
stopped. I don't think he gave a single order, and like when his dragonfly got shot down, that was it. Duke became just a placeholder.
Another grunt, yeah.
And the
Another
reason, like the
regular
moment where I thought, okay, it's definitely Ricondo's show. Apart from all the stuff where he's leading the guys through the jungle, which is his specialty, so I'll give him credit for that, without necessarily elevating him to the squad leader role. But the moment where I thought, maybe Ricondo is actually in charge, is when Copperhead is driving them in the moccasin back to Cobra's base, and it's Ricondo who kind of, without any prompting from Duke, just knocks Copperhead out. He's like, I don't know, calls him poison breath or something, and just beans him over the head. I'm like, do you really have authority to decide when to knock out the prisoner? Like, surely that's like Duke should have made that decision.
But
Well, Duke takes
can't hear the
control again
hyenas.
once they're in the base. He takes control again. Like he's the one responding to Cobra Commander when Cobra Commander kind of like says stuff.
True. Yeah,
So
I guess for a passage of this episode, I thought, maybe they have kind of rotated command.
So I couldn't help but think of MCDJ ACDC when watching this episode, because I felt like this is like one of the first big like fun moments for Copperhead. And we all know that he's a big fan of Copperhead, the character. So I couldn't help but thinking of Andrew. So Andrew, I was thinking of you while watching this episode, bro. And seeing the water moccasin and all that. That was actually really cool as well to see in the episode. But something that needs to totally be mentioned, and this is a rarity. So when I started getting my hands on GI Joe episodes via download or weird DVD collections or whatever's here and there, this episode stood out to me as being one of the most, if not the most, Snake Eyes action-packed episode of them all. Because so I'm very much a Snake Eyes fan, or was very much a Snake Eyes fan when I was younger in GI Joe, and always like, oh, I hope we see Snake Eyes in this episode, and this one we do, and he does some seriously cool stuff for a change, and I love that, and that was really great. Like, it was cool to see him like kick. Like, I even joked with Celia. I'm like the hyenas are running out, and she's like, "Who let the dogs out?" And I'm like, "Yo, what? Somebody's gonna kick a hyena." And it's Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes kicks a hyena. Like,
Did you get a breakdancer vibe though?
Yes. Yeah, I totally
like
got
he was
that vibe.
doing some like windmill flares.
I got
when he
that as well,
kicks.
like some kind of capoeira, breakdancing, some kind of vibe there. Yeah.
Do you think the animators? Well, it was possibly the same guys who did his animation in the Pyramids of Darkness, where he does his breakdance performance, and they're like, maybe that's how this guy fights. He gets down on the floor and he kicks.
And it was so cool, man. It was just cool to see Snake Eyes being Snake Eyes. And the thing I want to mention about this is that the Sunbow cartoon managed to keep the magic and mystery of Snake Eyes because of how little they use him. For whatever reason, be it he can't talk, whatever's, but they definitely made him more mystical, because when I talk to people who are not GI Joe fans but loved the cartoon when they were younger, they always list Snake Eyes as being one of their favorite characters, and I'm like, yeah, but he's only in the cartoon 3 or 4 times, maybe a little bit more than that, as an appearance in the background. And when they think about it, they're like, oh yeah, he really is. He's not that prevalent in the cartoon, but yet he made a huge impact. And it's because of episodes like this that he totally does. And it was cool. It was cool to have that. It was cool for Snake Eyes to actually shine in a fun way in a cartoon that he doesn't dominate as being the super weapon, which is stark contrast to what we're kind of seeing in the Renegades now and in the comic book, especially the comic book, where he's like you mentioned earlier, he's kind of like a god. And it was just fun in the cartoon to just see him being cool. And it was cool.
He
and also
does make one god move though. There's a cave in, and he's the guy coming up on the rear. So the cave in happens. The Joes are clear the cave in, except for Snake Eyes. And what happens there? He kind of kicks a rock, and then he's okay, and he's in the next scene. I don't feel like there was any payoff to that beat.
Yeah. Also, a bit of a downer on this episode.
The cave in open, and then
that's what we led to believe. Cave-ins kick
Chuck
children.
Norris before Chuck Norris existed.
Don't stick your fingers in plugs, children. Snake Eyes
kick the rhinoceros.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised he didn't kick the rhino either. That would have just been an animal too far. But
kick.
But yeah, the rider kick. Sorry, I got a Kamen Rider model kit recently to build on our live stream, and it's just making me think of when you said that kick, Rider kick, Snake Eyes kick. Anyway, there is something that in this episode as well that I found quite interesting, and I feel like there's a mental block. But what the hell is the Vulcan machine do? What does it do?
Lava.
Yeah.
Really? Is that all it does? Because I couldn't really put that together for some reason. I don't know, mate. I don't know what happened in my brain.
Very briefly. He's like, now we can send lava to destroy any city in the whole world. And there's a little graphic where he shows it draws lava from the center of the planet and just makes it come up anywhere in the whole planet.
So I think my problem, my personal problem there is not. This is not a criticism. I think it's just because I've watched so many of these episodes that I'm just like, Cobra's got an improbable machine. It's going to do something improbable. And I'm probably going to tell me what it is. I don't really care because it's just stupid anyway, but it's cool and I'm happy and it looks nice. But for some reason that just didn't get into my brain. And yeah, looking back at that feels like it hurts the episode a little bit. But otherwise, man, it is great. Also, somebody needs to tell those animators what India looks like, because that's not what India looks like. It doesn't look like Mogadishu, dude. It looks like India.
I'm prepared to give it a pass. India's a pretty big place. You could make it look like a sprawling city. You could make it look like a jungle. You could make it look like a desolate wasteland. It all still be India.
Could. Either way, but if you're going to do that, just make sure that when you put a thing in your credits about how the Stanford University or whatever supervises some of the educational aspects of this cartoon, that you make sure that you draw freaking India properly. Just a stupid thing. Maybe give us an establishing of the Taj Mahal, for example, just to really put us in the shot. No, man,
that's going too far.
I'm going too far, but I'm just saying these are little things, little things. It's not like a small cartoon here, This is not a cartoon.
Not accurate. The sequences where they were in the city, doesn't the Ganges have those huge steps running down it, and really clustered buildings?
I think it totally does have that.
Enough.
I don't know. It just felt a little bit too rural. I don't know. It felt a bit. Yeah, I don't know. It just felt a little bit too rural.
At least we didn't encounter any indigenous people.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
Mr. Red Flag there, though. I mean, this is a cartoon of the 80s, and Ricardo does call them natives. Eek.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
overall, I think it's
Ugh.
a pretty entertaining episode. Yes, it's by the numbers, but I mean, at least it's I think it's fun overall. You know, there is kind of
Yeah.
like certain sequences like with the rhino, which may be a bit too far, a bit silly. But I mean, overall, I think it's just a fun episode. It's inoffensive. There's nothing terrible about it. It's not like wow, absolutely crazy, amazing. It's just kind of cool to see them going through a jungle. And the animation generally is quite good.
Yeah.
I mean, like early on, I really enjoyed the close up of
The doctor.
Zartan.
Oh,
Well, the doctor, yes,
yes.
but of Zartan as well. It's just a really cool close up, like, hey, now we've got them. You're going down
Which
the wrong
incidentally
passage.
is the thumbnail on
Yeah, on
YouTube.
YouTube.
Mm,
Yeah,
good
very
pick.
cool
So
shot. But yeah,
Very
inoffensive
anime.
episode. Very just fun overall. I didn't think I kind of had any major problems with it going all the way through.
I
I'd
hope
probably give it
Sunbow
a
does more episodes like
3.5.
this. Same here, bro. 3.5 from me as well.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I
throw it
think
at
Zartan.
2.5. Kind of right down the
Ooh.
middle. I didn't particularly enjoy it, and I don't think I'll enjoy doing a rewatch. So this is enough jungle
well,
trap for
it's
me.
just to buy the numbers, as you said. You know, like it's inoffensive. Like there's nothing that makes it stand out, but it's not bad. So I
Doesn't
think
move the needle for me.
2.5 is fair too.
Dragonfly, Zartan, Snake Eyes fighting, Recondo, sensing the
Tons
hyenas,
of cool vehicles.
Copperhead, Moccasin, GI Joe's getting into disguise, and very cool looking Vulcan device, even though I didn't know what it was for. These are things that win for me.
The
And
ending,
there was a line.
not give it away, where they're running away from molten lava.
No, I just thought like something blew up in the volcano for some
So
reason. I don't know why.
shiny.
I don't know why. I don't know why. Like I fuzzed out. Guys, there's a line where they is it in Renegades or in this one? Sorry, I did watch them back to back. There's a line that somebody
Back
throws at Snake Eyes about not having a lot to say.
Yes.
Well, that was Duke. He's like, I gave you an order not to come back for me, but you did. Thank goodness. If you promise not to say anything about this, neither will I. Something to that effect.
That's
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
cool. That's
Very
cool.
cute.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
it's rare for the cartoon to kind of put a name to the fact that Snake Eyes doesn't speak. It doesn't go
Yeah.
into the reasons, it doesn't go into the backstory, and it doesn't often mention it. But yeah, that's a nice little jab. It tells us that the writers at least know that Snake Eyes doesn't speak.
He doesn't speak.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
it's a
that's
good
all
line.
you need to know.
I really swooned over Chris Lartz's read on this one line, Cobra Commander line, obviously. You may bow if you wish. Like the doctor confronts him, and it's like this pomp and this circumstance that Cobra Commander brings to himself. It's delicious.
Absolutely.
am Cobra Commander. You may bow if you wish. Kiss my ass. Ah, that's great. But yes, guys, fun episode. Unoffensive, but neither here nor there for me. And
Yeah,
I'm
well,
less
that's-
interested
yeah,
in
as I
watching
said.
GI Joe take on hyenas and rhinoceroses, and far more interested in rattlers and water moccasins.
We know that's your
Shall we
your
close
vibe.
out with a delightful dive into issue 4, Operation Wingfield, or is that too much for one episode?
It's too much.
We should-
I've got an idea. Sorry, I know I cut
Yes.
you off, man,
Just
and I'm like
absolutely
such an
wild.
asshole for doing it.
No, I needed a decision.
You
and
really
I'm glad I
are.
didn't have to be the one
Episode
making it.
4, I feel like episode 4 is really rife ground for a fantastic controversial conversation, actually.
Word.
Ooh,
Because
what
it's-
about
it's
Did we
it's
just do
issue
an
4, by
entire
the way, Paul.
episode?
Yes.
Focus on
Did I
episode
say?
4?
Oh, sorry. Did I say episode? I meant issue 4.
Series
It's
4?
just. It's. I felt like when I was reading it, I was like, "Damn! I don't feel like we not have enough episode, for this and other things. I feel like this really should be like
Wow.
it's not a whole
Issue-
episode dedicated to this, but it's very poignant, and I think it's very
Right.
worth reading. Yeah.
Word.
Okay, well,
Talking
that
about the next episode.
It
So
does
yeah.
tip the
That's
scales
wild.
because I could go either way. I could kind of summarize it in a sentence, or I
In
could
a sentence,
tease it
we'll
out
talk for hours.
over an entire podcast. But yes, issue 4 of ARAH is Operation Wingfield. It is an
Wingfield.
issue where GI Joe is not taking on Cobra, but instead a paramilitary organization within the United States itself. It's got high stakes action with nuclear Armageddon in the balance.
Oof.
It's
Gorgeous
it's-
Herb Trimpy art.
and Herb
Yep.
Trimpy plot. This is
Mm.
not Larry Hama brainchild. He might have written the
The
script,
villain is
but
awesome. Yeah,
okay.
so-
Well, then,
So
Oh,
let's-
Paul,
if that
let's-
sounds
let's save
interesting
this-
to you guys,
let's
Yeah.
reconvene a week from now.
Yeah,
Like,
let's
let's
do it
do
a week from
bonus. Mm.
Yeah.
bonus
Because I
episode
really want to
291.
get into the nuts and bolts of that episode, and also maybe just play a game with it as well. Just
That
in
series.
the episode and see where we could take
Issue.
certain ideas and things. Issue, sorry, my brain.
chapter.
TV series, chapter 4, episode issue 4. Fucking stop it, Paul. What I do want to quickly steal 10 minutes of this episode for, or even 5 minutes of this
Oh
episode,
my
is just
goodness, you're stealing
rave-
from us.
to rave about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Word.
Because
Yes. So this will occupy the last
Oof.
10 minutes of this podcast. If you don't want to be spoiled for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3,
Step off
we-
now.
we bid you adieu. Thank you for listening. The patrons, we thank you. We salute you. These are them. Doot. Bleep bloop. And doot. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk a little bit about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Paul and I have seen it. Rob doesn't care. If
I
indeed
don't
you
give
don't
a
care
shit.
about spoilers, you can listen to this.
Stay with us so that we can tell you
At your leisure.
Yojo, but at a longer time.
So
Long range Jojo. Paul, what do you want to
Hey.
say about Guardians 3?
So so I'm sure you guys can immediately tell by the tone of my voice that I'm very excited about it. I really enjoyed it. It was a great cinematic experience, especially when so many comic movies have just felt very dry and by the numbers. And maybe it doesn't hurt. Maybe it really helps Guardians that the last Marvel film I watched was Wakanda Forever, or whatever the second Black Panther movie is. Don't watch that. That was a stark contrast to Guardians. Also, I really enjoy the Guardians of the Galaxy. I love that concept. I love that type of character, that kind of team and that kind of concept. So to have it finished off nicely was exciting. Like this idea that, okay, cool, they're going to finish off that trilogy. It's awesome. And I would almost go as far as to say that it's probably the best trilogy in the entire MCU. Because, yeah.
Oh, in the
because
MCU. Okay.
in the MCU, yeah, not in movies ever. I mean, come on now, Star Wars, Indiana Jones exist, so we don't want to mess with that. Some people like Lord of the Rings, but yeah, guys, I just really loved it. It was a great way to finish the arc on some of these characters, and it sets them up well, and it pays off to the fans of the movies. And yeah, man, it's a real gut punch, dude. Like, geez, like Celia and I were in tears in this film,
Well, without
But-
having seen it, the only nitpick I have with the movie without having seen it, I don't
Mhm.
like the casting of Warlock. Like, it's not that I absolutely love the character Warlock, but he looks very distinctively, has a distinctive look in the comic books, especially from his time in Infinity Gauntlet and all that sort of stuff in the 80s.
yes.
And the actor that they got to play him does not look like him at all to me. Like,
Okay,
he
but
looks wrong.
Okay, so
There's a reason for that.
yeah, there is a reason for
Oh,
that,
fascinating.
and also I also love that. Like,
Well, Paul,
yeah,
Rob,
because-
you don't mind being spoiled.
I don't
So
mind
I'll put
spoilers
you-
at all.
I'll
I'm
put you out
very
of your
curious
misery.
to hear this.
It's because we're seeing Adam Warlock at his creation. So he's fully formed and he's fully powerful, but he's very immature.
Such an
Rational.
idiot.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
Such an
he
idiot.
actually is an idiot.
He's
I mean,
such a
perhaps there will
moron.
be an evolution of this guy to being the wistful, like, know-it-all space dude.
Yeah,
No,
I
it's
mean, I'm
Space
not
Adonis.
attached to the character, but like he has a certain look, and from the trailers and like clips I've seen, I'm just like, it doesn't look like him. Like that, I just
No.
wanted him to look like Warlock if I ever saw him on the big screen.
And to be perfectly honest, he's a buffoon in this as a result because he's
Yeah.
all powerful, but he's essentially like a couple of weeks old.
and
Or
he's,
we feel
he's
that
just
way.
That's an
he
interesting
is
take.
he's such a like a football player
Jock,
typecast
mama's
jock kind
boy.
of-
Yeah,
he's just
works.
such a great.
Which is kind of cool because I mean, Gunn has played with obviously like the development of like Groot over the three
Yes.
movies. Like, yes, he is fully formed in the first movie, he dies, but then
Mhm.
over the last two movies, as well as all his other appearances, he has been growing again. back
And-
towards being an adult. And it is interesting to hear that he does play with that, in like this character's brand new, like literally. And what does that do to a character? That's kind of cool.
And this
Yeah,
is one
these characters
little
have arcs. They definitely have growth over the course of
which
these
is
films.
cool. Also, man, like you mentioned Groot, like, so I don't want to go too far with Groot because Rob, there are some things that I just feel like knowing them before the end of the film, it's going to color your opinion of certain things. But I definitely feel like this film was clearly, in the eyes of Marvel and the whole James Gunn conspiracy, the whole James Gunn controversy. I think Marvel was kind of like,
He was
in a
fired and
softer-
then rehired for
Yeah.
some things
Yeah.
that he said on Twitter like decades ago.
Yeah,
For anyone not knowing.
and so they also kind of soft punished this film because there aren't any toys yet. There isn't major merch, and there sure as shit isn't anything new Groot wise. So it feels like he took that ball and ran with it because there's a section where Groot loses his head, and he's got spider legs, and it's definitely like the least marketable thing for a child ever. It's like Spider Groot, and because it's kind of freaky. And I love that. I love that they did that. Like you got this
That's gonna be
disembodied
that's gonna be a
Groot head.
Build-A-Figure part. You wait
Oh,
and
it's going to be
see.
awesome.
Oh no,
Legends-
it will definitely be, but it's not a plushie. Is what I'm saying. You're not gonna find it next to the I am Groot dancing plant toy or next to Grogu. You know what I mean? In the same like section of the toy aisle. It's very like anti-marketing, and I love that. I also like that the film, like how the previous movies. I know that a lot of us had the eye roll moment of people going, "I am Groot," and you're like, "Yes, you watched the fucking Marvel movie. Congratulations." But this film doesn't do that, and I love that. Like, it's really good at like it kind of rips itself off with some things quite well. And the Groot thing, they like totally stopped with it. They stopped making Groot like I am Groot all the time. He's there, and it's cool. He's like part of the team, whatever. He's like there now.
He's like the
Drax
snake
is-
eyes of the Guardians.
Yeah, he kind of became a little bit like that, and then it feels like they put him to the back a bit. I mean, Adam Warlock, coming back to that character, when I first saw that we were going to get Adam Warlock, as the teaser at the end of the credits, and this was obviously before Infinity Gauntlet had really kicked off properly, I was like, holy shit, we're going to get Adam Warlock in the whole Infinity Gauntlet thing, and that's going to be amazing. And then that never played out, and then they played out that other whole thing that a lot of people love that I don't fully love, but whatever's. But what he is now is so much cooler. Like what they've done with that character now is much better because now if Adam Warlock does go into his final form within the Marvel U, like we will understand that better. And as audiences, we're going to feel a lot more hurt if he goes that darker direction. And so that's an interesting thing as well that they've kind of set up there for future films, but without it being new Guardians of the Galaxy. Another thing that I think is great is this villain. So there have been a lot of villains in the MCU, and none of them. And I mean, okay, so Steve, I know where you're gonna. Steve and I have sort of chatted about this a bit, like off air. So I know that what they did with this villain is like kind of cheap shots. It's very easy to make us hate this villain because of what he does. But of all the Marvel Universe villains, I really feel like he's the most despicable. I really hate him. Like, I don't hate Thanos, for example, but I really hate, the High Evolutionary. Like, I really hate him, and they make him really despisable.
There's
They
something
don't even.
about inflicting pain on defenseless, cute animals
It
that
just
really
Instantly
just
makes a
like,
person evil.
yeah,
It makes
fuck
you a
you,
super
fuck
asshole.
you to hell.
No, exactly.
This guy needs to burn. Yeah.
And he's also a genocidal maniac, and he's like a eugenist. Like he's all into like eugenics and stuff as well, which also weirdly
Thank
enough
God.
makes him worse than
Just
a
like,
Nazi.
oh, I don't like this creation. Incinerate it. I don't like
Boom.
that entire planet that I made. Destroy it. Yeah,
Yeah.
bad times. I mean, if you're a fan of furries,
You're gonna really hate
this
him.
is- well, I was going to say this is the film for you because my goodness, Counter Earth is populated by like
Well, furries.
anthropomorphic pandas and badgers and
And rats and everything else. And
fruit
it's-
bats. I think at one
Fruit
point.
bats. Yeah, and it's so daunting, and like not daunting, it's so jarring to see, because but that was also such an amazing gag in and of itself. It's great. James Gunn is really really great. I feel sorry.
I'm glad they
I
rehired him.
yeah, fuck,
The
man,
cost
because
petition, they weren't going to finish out this series with anyone else.
totally.
I
And
remember a very
Nebula,
kind of inspiring speech by John Batista, post. He wrote out,
yeah,
like, that they all stand together. Disney and Marvel need to get their shit together and pull their head out of their ass and get James Gunn back. And they did.
totally. Yeah.
Mm.
And also, like, it's a great nod if you're like a James Gunn fan, or at least you're a fan of all of his films, Marvel and or otherwise. There's a lot of cameos of actors from other movies that he's like done. You know, for example, I mean, you got Nathan Fillion in there, and everybody knows Nathan Fillion's in there, but it's he's in there, which is great. And that whole scene is super freaking awkward. Like that whole base, it's just it's
Ah,
nasty.
yes. Lavish
It's
bit of
made out of
design there. Yeah,
oh
techno
god, it's
organic. It basically looks like they're sneaking into a giant space colon.
yeah, it's so gross. It's like the last level of like certain video games when you're in like the ass of an alien or something, and you're fighting like you're on your way to
Totally.
the alien queen. And
Gloopy, like there's
yeah,
piss everywhere. It's great.
and it's
There's
got some good stakes as
intestinal
well.
walls. And then contrast that with the kind of the almost lack of design. Like they instead of going super high tech with the high evolutionaries labs and his cages and stuff, they look like the cages of any vivisection lab in current history. Like it's
Mm,
Hmm.
dark and wet and rusty and creaky. It doesn't feel like space at all. Um, and I just found that stark contrast between all this kind of design work and lavish budget being thrown at making a place look very spacey and very weird, and then all of a sudden it's very realistic. Oh, it was creepy. But the
this,
overarching thing that I want to say, and perhaps leave people who are on the fence about seeing this film on, is we are all experiencing Marvel Cinematic Universe burnout,
yeah,
big time, right?
yeah,
Back
yeah.
in the heady days of the earlier phases of the MCU, I disregarded the Guardians films because they felt very separate. I'm like, I'm not really concerned in this galaxy hopping adventure with these, second or third tier characters because I want to get back to what's happening on Earth with Cap and Iron Man and Thor and the Infinity Stones and the Avengers and Ultron and all that stuff. So it was very easy to ignore or just watch once and then disregard these films. Now I find, having had the trilogy capped off, my interest in watching the other two is at an all-time high because for the exact reason that these films step outside the MCU. They are
Yep.
untarnished, unblemished, unaffected by the goings on in the now kind of tail spinning main cinematic universe. Like
Totally.
I'm so disinterested in phase 4, and these films fortunately avoid any of that stink. So
Yep.
I wish this volume 3 every bit of success because it is a return to the old form of being excited about cartoon characters, comic book characters again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is
And
a very
also,
satisfying end. It gave me more intrigue and more interest than the other two. I think it is the strongest entry on the trilogy.
oh, it definitely is. I mean, even the whole
Mm.
thing with Gamora is so clever. Like that was also the way that they put it in, and they subvert a lot of your expectations, and they tease you with it, and it's great. That's good writing. Nebula has grown so much as a character, and I love Nebula. I've loved Nebula since I saw her as a Marvel Masterpieces card. I was like, who's this blue character? Read on the back.
Good
Oh,
for
okay, she's
you,
a space
dude.
pirate.
I think I
Looked
speak
up.
for a lot of people when I say Nebula wasn't a blip on my radar. Like I thought she was going to be a disposable baddie for that first
Mm,
Hmm.
film, but she has grown to be an anti-hero and now, like, yeah, absolute highlights of the character roster.
and and just also like like I got to say, like I know for a lot of people, Karen Gillan entered your radar from like watching Doctor Who. For me, I kind of went backwards. I saw Karen Gillan in an episode of Doctor Who. Was like, oh my word, this is a beautiful redheaded woman who's got like this really quirky character in this show. Yes,
That'll do it.
I really love Karen Gillan. Okay, like amazing actor, and just beautiful woman. And I didn't have DSTV, like I didn't have satellite, so I couldn't really watch more Doctor Who. So it was kind of like a faded thing. And then I watched Guardians. Oh, was it? It wasn't even. Yeah, it was. Was it Guardians? Well, anyway, the first time I saw her, I was like, "Oh my word!" And wait for it. I was like, because there's another actor I love very much as well, as a lady called Rachel Lee Cook, who I also adore. And I thought maybe it was like Rachel Lee Cook is Nebula. So I was like, interesting, because they have a very similar facial structure when they in blue. And I had to check in the credits, and I was like, oh my word, who's Karen Gillan? And then I looked up Karen Gillan and found out she was in Doctor Who. And then I was like, okay, I've got to actually watch Doctor Who properly now. And because this woman is an incredible actor. And also because they just did like something cool to a character I really like and have always been interested in. Because I really love the idea of a space pirate in like deep cosmic reaches of the universe and doing all kinds of cool, crazy stuff. And yeah, they nailed it. And after 3 movies, they've grown this character really well, and they've just made her fun. And you know, she's become more and less uptight, and it's awesome. I mean, Drax, the metaphor thing and analogies, and Drax's writing is also on point. Everything's great. Everything about the show is great. I really, really want a Rocket Raccoon figure. I actually really would love all of the Guardians as figures, whether they be 6-inch or 4-inch. We can only dream for 4-inch, so I would settle with a Marvel Legends collection of them. But they're
Well,
cool.
since they have now adopted their uniform at long last, it only took 10 years. There was a Toys R Us exclusive 4-pack, 5-pack. Rob, you've got it.
Yeah.
Very comic book looking appearances for Drax and Nebula and Quill and Rocket. But nevertheless, they were wearing that uniform. Paul, are you interested in that?
I am interested in that, actually. That's very cool. I must look that
They're
up.
4-inch figures. And last I checked, I still saw them in stores. Eek.
Oh wow! Because I like the Guardians comic books as well. In fact, what kind of got me into Guardians was when I saw it was written by Dan Abnett, and everybody was like, Dan Abnett's so amazing. So I was like, okay, how amazing is he? And then I read Guardians. I was like, oh wow, no, he's pretty good. Like damn, like he, you know, that was that whole thing. Rob, I think it's called Annihilation. They also worked it into that huge arc in Marvel in the comic books, and there was that whole, and that was really awesome, like really dark and really like disparate and stuff. But anyway, Guardians is awesome, guys. It is totally worth the price of admission. For me, it was worth twice the price of admission because I had to pay for 2 tickets. Actually, I didn't, because I have a subscription service through the movie company, so they give you 4 tickets a month to watch any film you want, which is really nice for us in South Africa because movies end up being small fortunes, and I'm sure it is like that for most people around the world. And so that was great, and it got me back into cinema, and I enjoyed my cinema experience. And yeah, so check it out, guys. And Rob, check it out, dude. Go and check it out. Go and watch that movie.
I definitely will. I will definitely wait for it to go on Disney Plus.
Well, I caught Quantumania on Disney Plus.
Quantumania's on Disney Plus. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah.
I will
okay.
definitely skip that on Disney Plus.
I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it just is, and it's its own thing and its own world. And
I need the movies to be good. Like I can't waste my time watching okay movies just because it's a Marvel movie. Like I will watch Guardians of the Galaxy. I will not watch.
It is good. It is skippable, but it's got a great score and it's a beautiful film. Like it's a good.
And I think that that fella they got to hire, Kang, won't be around for much longer. Something gives me the slightest of indications that he might be recast. So yeah, don't get attached to Jonathan Majors just yet.
It's a pity because he's brilliant. Actually,
is he really?
Yeah, he is. Like I really like his character. I think I look at this guy and I'm like, you're better than Marvel films.
Well, bro, if the allegations are true, no, he's not brilliant. He's a piece of shit and deserves
No,
to
he's a
not
piece
be
of
hired.
shit. But what are the allegations
But
behind
I'm
it
not
anyway?
judge, jury, and executioner. No, look, this isn't a Hollywood gossip
This isn't the space
podcast.
for
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
But Google's your friend if you want to find out the
Yeah, I'm
the
gonna look
scoop
it up.
on
I haven't
Jonathan
seen
Majors.
anything like that. Pity,
But
because
also, don't be trial by public opinion just yet. I mean, these are all, I think, ongoing legal matters. So I'm certainly not trying to be some kind of sensationalist podcaster or YouTuber.
Decide
Whatever.
for yourself.
Yeah, go for it.
Do it.
I think
As
then
we
that
have
is.
decided to end. Right here.
Take us home, Robbie.
So that's been 290. We talked comics and movies. Cartoons, movies too. We talked about O-rings, how Hasbro hates O-rings apparently. But good times. Join us on Patreon if you want to listen to us as we record these. Join the live studio audience. We also do T-shirts. T-shirts are pretty cool. All right, these are the amazing patrons that joined
you get
us
to wear cool
live.
T-shirts now. It's summer, so you get to like show off your GI Joburg
Absolutely,
love. Get some
summer's
cool
the
shirts.
best. I'm loving summer. Oh,
Or if
wait,
you're in the Southern
winter, yeah.
Hemisphere, you
Wait,
can have
wait.
a hoodie.
Yeah,
Nice
you can
hoodie.
grab yourself a hoodie, which will unfortunately kill you for shipping into South Africa. But one can dream. Maybe what
is
we'll
it-
do is we'll send a whole bunch to Steven. And when he comes to South Africa, he can bring us some GI Joburg hoodies from our
For whatever
Bring us our
reason,
own merch.
electronics and T-shirts are the most heavily taxed items going into RSA. Bloody hell.
Absolutely.
Disgusting.
I remember when Full Force sent us some T-shirts, and I had to pay duty on each individual shirt. Bloody
Yeah.
hell!
Now imagine, companies trying to do that.
But thank you,
Anywho.
Full Force,
Not gonna
because that's a cool shirt, and I wear it proudly. So just saying, I love my Storm Shadows shirt.
I never iron any of my clothes, but sadly,
Neither
when
do I.
I was in Singapore, Kim's parents have a domestic worker, and she took an iron to my Chris McLeod Zartan designed shirt,
No.
and it did
Shock,
not
shock.
survive. She was very apologetic, but it was like, it's okay.
Well,
dead
it's
now.
a one of a
Damage is
kind.
done. Yeah, it's now very distressed. You can barely make out Zartan on the front. But thanks for joining us, guys. We are actually going to be back a week from now. You heard it on this podcast to talk
Oh
about
my
issue
goodness.
4, Operation Wingfield. Give it some
Original G.I.
air.
Joe.
Awesome.
Yeah. Read
So
it.
see you then.
Berg,
Yo,
Berg,
Joe.
Berg, 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 Berg,
There's no
Berg, Berg,
lyrics.
Berg, 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 Berg.